Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission for Tuesday, August 20th to order, please. Please note that all commissioners are present except Commissioner Zomer. Would like to go over the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any adjustments, corrections, improvements? If no one has anything any issues with minutes for July 16th, can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
And stay.
I abstain.
I abstain.
So Hamilton stays and Ann Warner?
We're away.
Okay. Yes, please.
Okay, and number 4 on our agenda, Preservation Planner Lambert is going to enlighten us with a 5-minute field guide on the Sanborn fire insurance maps.
Thank you, Chairman Hiller. Tonight I'm going to just briefly introduce you and the listening audience and the people gathered here tonight about Sanborn fire insurance maps. I refer to those quite often, and I get a lot of questions from both commissioners and applicants wondering where I get some of the information that I share with all of you. And a lot of that does come from Sanborn fire insurance maps. Sanborn fire insurance maps were not created as a historical resource, but were actually created to set insurance rates and determine the insurability of certain buildings within a town. Typically, the buildings that were identified in a Sanborn fire insurance map were either in close proximity to the local fire department or main city well, or were based on private fire protection that certain properties may have on their own parcel. Typically, the buildings were rated based on construction materials and their combustibility, and that then set insurance rates for fire insurance for buildings. The city of Geneva was first mapped in 1887, and mapping ended for the community in 1945. As fire protection improved across the city of Geneva, larger areas were mapped. So the 1885 maps for Geneva are only 2 or 3 sheets, where the later ones are 16 or 17 sheets of blocks that were documented. The fire maps generally included information about the local fire department, whether it was a volunteer fire department, whether it was full-time, what kind of equipment they had. Did they have a horse-drawn steam pumper? Did they have later a gas engine vehicle? How many feet of hose they had, et cetera, et cetera. Ladders, all those sorts of things. It also documented what the water facilities were in a municipality so that they could document what the water sources were and what the pressure was in the community, again, as a way to rate the fire susceptibility of buildings within the community. Whoops. A lot of people ask how this information was gathered. The Sanborn Fire Insurance Map Company prepared its maps with an army of surveyors who traveled from town to town. They literally worked from strangers' backyards, although surveyors were told to contact the police station first. There were stories of surveyors being thrown in jail, attacked by dogs, or reported as spies as they were trying to go about to do their work. They relied heavily on the surveyor's manual, which was published by the insurance companies, to instruct the surveyors how to take careful notes and make diagrams that were then developed into intricately drawn hand-colored maps that have become invaluable now to historians. Surveyors gathered information from local courthouses, but where information was not readily available, they actually measured individual buildings by hand. Field surveyors often spent several weeks to several months gathering information in the local community before the field survey notebooks were delivered to New York City, where cartographers drew the maps, lithographers printed the maps, and artists hand-tinted the maps. The entire mapping process would require 2 to 6 months from sending forth surveyors to issuing the completed maps to a community. So the hand tinting looks something like this. So this is some keys from various Sanborn maps. We work off black and white copies. so we do not have the advantage of color coded maps, but there are a lot of repositories around the United States, including several here in Illinois, that we can get copies of colored maps where we need them or where it provide more clarity. So you can see the different colors mean different things if you can read it from where you're sitting, and different information about fire construction. I won't go into all of these details this evening. But then they also identified special hazards as shown in the document on the right. It was once believed that all buildings in a community that were within the mapping area were mapped. However, in recent years, it has come to be understood that certain areas, although within the mapped areas, were not deemed worthy of insuring or protection in the case of a calamity. For instance, in Geneva, we know that certain buildings existed in some areas of town at the time the Sanborn maps were drawn. However, those buildings are not depicted because they were not deemed to be worthy of insurance or protection in the case of a fire. Two good examples of those are the railroad shanties that were built along the railroad when the railroad was put through town, and also on South River Lane, where we have known it was known as the Sicilian neighborhood or Sicilian colony, and was primarily rundown shanties for laborers. The cover sheets of each set of maps, which the sets were either loose leaf for small towns or sizable bound volumes for larger cities, include an index of streets and, as I said, information about the fire protection facilities and manpower in the community. As time has evolved, there have been many companies and many historians who've tried to put together a comprehensive list of Sanborn symbols and abbreviations. I can tell you that none of these is complete because there are hundreds and hundreds of symbols and abbreviations that were used. This is one example that I was able to acquire for use here at Geneva that was produced by an engineering company that is probably one of the more comprehensive lists of abbreviations and explanations of what the maps mean. So as an example, this is one of the black and white maps from 1905 for Geneva. And you can see that the buildings are drawn where they belong on the lots and to scale. And over on the right is an example of one of the properties from this section of map. And you can see there's information that tells us how tall the building was. This is a 1.5 story building at the front. It's a 1-story addition at the rear or wing at the rear. The porch is 1 story. The X's show that was a wood shingle roof. Some of you have asked how I know whether it's wood shingle or metal. The symbols drawn on the maps tell me that information. The D tells us that it was a dwelling unit, and it shows the basic partitions of the house itself. Why is all that important? If you were fighting a fire or trying to see if a building could be saved, you need to know where the bearing walls and those things are at. So they tried to record as much information as possible. Aside from recording stores and homes, they also recorded outbuildings. This is a barn at the back of the building, and it tells you that it had 1-story wings and a 1.5 story central portion. And again, it was a shingle roof. Oh, I'm just highlighting that in the barn. But of primary importance was identifying the manufacturing facilities in the community. And this is an example of the C.E. Mann shop that was at 4th and Stevens Street, recorded in September, or published in September of 1891. The map identifies several different things about the property. It talks about the fire protection that's on site. So at the top, it's telling that it has a night watchman. It has power and heat, it has steam heat, it has lights, lamps, and they have buckets and barrels of water on site to fight fires. It also tells that they have 120 feet of 2.5-inch hose and 75 feet of 1-inch hose. And just to give some bearing in the community, it tells that it's about 1/2 mile north of the courthouse, because that would have been one of the prominent buildings to locate in a community. It also tells that in the middle building, which is the barrel shop, that is attached to the painting office, that there is an attachment with 60 feet of hose. So there's a standpipe in that building. Again, that would be one of the high hazard buildings with the barrel manufacturing and the painting and the heaters used to form the barrels. So again, it tells us a lot of information. It also tells us hazardous operations on site. So again, the painting shop, but also in the lower section of the map here, we see there's the coal room, there's engine shop that was the engine that would have created the power for the property, and then in the center of that building there are brick steam ovens. Again, all those things would be fire hazards. And then lastly, in a manufacturing facility will often tell us what kind of machinery was in the building so that we knew what we were fighting. So from a historian's standpoint, not only does it tell us about the architecture, but also tells us about the function. It tells us about the level of mechanization in these buildings and gives us an idea of what the operations were. So there's, aside from how we use it, historians use these maps for a lot of other purposes to understand what went on in these 19th and early 20th century buildings. So with that ends this field guide. If you have questions or comments, I'll be glad to take those or answer them.
Anyone have a question? I do. Did the cities, obviously this would be an advantage to the city too at the time, so did they cooperate and help the Sanborn company with the insurance maps?
The cities varied how much cooperation they provided, again, depending on the size and their sophistication, it seems. The larger cities really encouraged and tried to work with the insurance companies because it was advantageous for them. Some of the smaller towns felt it was a little bit intrusive or maybe even kind of critical of their firefighting capability. It kind of shed a bad light on some of the small towns.
Yeah, because in 1891, we didn't have too much going on here for fire.
Correct.
I had one other question too. Internal walls, since they were just sort of looking at these houses from the outside, did they kind of interpolate where those walls are, the structural walls and supporting walls were?
I don't have the exact information how they got that, but I know they did talk to property owners lots of times, so I'm assuming some of this information was gathered from interviewing people or just knowing the building type or looking in a window and seeing what was going on.
Okay.
Quick question. How reliable have they been determined over time? 100%?
They're not 100%, but they're pretty infallible. And again, the buildings they recorded, they were trying to get a very accurate picture of what they were actually insuring. Because again, the insurance companies were not locally based. They wanted to know with pretty high accuracy what they were investing their money in.
And they produced them every 5 years?
They were not on a regular basis. So it was kind of based on when there were community improvements or as a community maybe had a population boom, they would then go back and re-record.
Then you have a great picture of a building over time.
Correct.
Perfect for us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Fifth on the agenda, we have 4 permit applications. First application is for 208 South River Lane. It's for demolition of an existing attached garage and construction of a new attached garage on a contributing property, and we have seen this in a concept review previous to this.
Thank you, Chairman Hiller and Commissioners. As was just pointed out, this property has come to you in the past as a concept review approximately 2 months ago. This property is at 208 South River Lane, which is located in the southeastern portion of the local Geneva Historic District and in the at the eastern edge of the Central Geneva Historic District, which is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. I won't belabor the history of the property in great detail because you are familiar with this, but this particular house is associated with Kate Raftery and her family. This was actually pictured in an article in the 1929 Chicago Daily News, this exact home. This was one of the first homes that was part of Kate Raftery's beautification project on River Lane to create artists' work home studios. What was brought to us in June was a concept proposal to remove the existing garages and an art studio and replace it with a new 2-car garage. To refresh your memory, the property was lived in several times by the Rafteries, and an original single-car garage was then converted to a laundry room. Another garage was added with a workshop. And eventually, when Howard Raftery lived here, when he was designing his own home, he built a small temporary art studio on top of the driveway for his own use to do paintings and other artwork. So this is the area of the house that is being considered for the new garage. The board and batten section is the temporary art studio that Howard Raftery built around 1947. Again, just the views to reacquaint yourself with what the existing conditions are. And the arrows point to an area that they have requested and are asking to close in a door that will not be used any longer. And then the other arrow on the right page, on the right side of the image, shows the original gable end of the original garage that's now a laundry room. So the proposal in the dashed lines you can see on the upper left is to remove all of the existing garages in the art studio and replace it with a new two-car garage. So these are the demolition elevations, and the picture at the lower center of the image is the door that's being requested to be closed. That is no longer a door that will be exiting from the home. The floor plans for the proposed new garage, which is consistent with what you saw at the concept review. And just to clarify, the lightly shaded area is the area of new construction. So the majority of the home that has been renovated and associated with the Raftery family is being preserved, but the garages are the new area of construction. The roof plan, if needed for reference, and the proposed elevations with the completed design, and then the materials that were approved in concept by the commission in June. So with that, I would like to turn the podium over to Brad Salins, the architect, and he can run through any details and answer any of your questions about the project. So Brad? I'll leave it there, but you can go backward or forward.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, as always, for greatly describing the project. As you mentioned, and you guys brought up, we have talked about it before. We were up here about 2 months ago, and almost nothing has changed since we were here. We just completed the documents and everything. So I can go through it again quickly if you want, but I think you understand it. The point I'll just highlight is the elevations that look identical to the last time we were here. So we didn't really change anything. And then the bottom right is where we're infilling the door. That was probably one of the larger items last time, but again, wasn't a big deal. I did include the picture that was requested from the last meeting, which is there in the bottom center. So we did remove the door already. We can replace it in kind, or we would prefer to actually infill siding and match what's surrounding it, so it doesn't look like a door anymore, because it will not be used as an entrance. I think that's about it. Does anybody have any questions?
No questions? I had only questions you've answered. Were there any changes from the original, which of course there aren't? And I believe this was built on the slab. It was built on the driveway itself.
Yeah, the art studio was built on the driveway. The garage is
wobbling. It really wasn't.
Yeah, the whole thing structurally is not able to be saved. The garages were built in different phases, so they're varying, and they're varying heights inside of it, and again, none of it is worth saving or trying to save at this point.
Okay, well, with no questions, can I get a motion?
A motion to approve 208 South River Lane as presented and in according to our direction from the June HPC meeting.
Fair enough. Second?
I'll second.
Hamilton seconds.
Roll call.
Hamilton,
Aye.
Hiller,
Aye.
Solomon,
Aye.
Stazen,
Aye.
Warner,
Aye.
Zinke. Aye. That passes. 6-0.
That was simple.
Great. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have 77 North First Street, application for replacement of windows, replacement of replacement windows, excuse me.
Thank you. Again, this is a commercial building in the North Geneva Historic District, listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and it's also on the far eastern edge of the local Geneva Historic District. The particular building here was built about in 1928 for the Geneva Garage and served as a automobile repair shop and sales floor, with the owner and manager's apartment on the upper level. At that time, the Lincoln Highway passed at the corner of First and State Street, and so there were a lot of automobile-related industries along this particular piece of property. The building was renovated by the Chodine Group about 25 years ago. Replacement double-hung windows were put in the building. The request today is simply to replace those replacement windows with an aluminum-clad double-hung window with simulated divided lights that meets our window policy. So it's that simple and straightforward of a request. With that, I will turn it over to Craig Chodine if you have any specific questions, but otherwise I think most of the information was included in your packet. And we do have pictures here, Craig, if you need to reference anything. This go forward and that'll go backward.
Okay. Good evening.
Hi.
Hello, welcome.
I don't know that I can really add much to that. The original windows that are in there just don't function at all. We're actually upgrading to Pella simulated divided light windows, so they're should last longer. And we're looking forward to not having the breezy windows in the winter.
Any comments? Questions?
Just so I'm clear, the windows that they're proposing to replace are replacement windows?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, no one fails to see the irony in this, I guess. I mean, for years, we tell people to save old windows. I'm not picking on you, I just but we always tell people to save old windows because old growth wood and old construction tends to just last longer. And the fact that these have deteriorated in 25 years is not surprising to me because that's what modern windows do. But, as much as we tell people that they should try to preserve old windows, they always feel that the newer are better. In my house, I have windows that are 112 years old. A lot of them still have the old glass. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's some maintenance involved in the fall and the spring, putting up windows in there. It's not working the same as a new window, but that's what you do in an old house. You get into an old house and you have old windows. But so I just, when I saw this falling apart in 25 years, it just stuck out at me. It was a glaring, point.
But isn't that a great example, though, of talking about how old growth wood.
I think the windows in my house are going to outlive me, and they'll serve, and they still perform the way they're supposed to, and I think the
Right.
next owner will benefit from them as
Right,
well. I
right.
mean, as long as you don't mind a little bit of maintenance, old windows will last you forever. Getting back to your windows, though, they match the size of the openings. There's no impact on the historic character of the building, and it's within our window policy, so I think we're fine with this. So can I have a motion for these windows?
I'd just like to add one thing for the record before that. All windows are not created equal.
Fair enough.
And so just because of the nature of the age does not in any means or method construe what the value or quality of the window is,
Okay,
okay?
well taken. But now you have to make the motion.
I move we approve the windows for 77 North First Street as presented.
And I'll second.
Hamilton,
Aye.
Pillar,
Aye.
Solomon,
Aye.
Stazen,
Aye.
Warner,
Aye.
Zinke.
Aye.
That Passes.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Good luck.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the next guy to do it. The next third item on the agenda was 10 North Third Street and 301 West State Street, a building that's so big it needs two addresses. And they are requesting to rehab the exterior facade. And we'll leave it to
Very good.
Mr. Lambert.
This is unusual that we have a project with two addresses, and I want to explain that the primary focus is at 10 North Third Street. However, the construction documents do show some replacement windows on the State Street facade. So to coordinate with our building division, we keep track of things by addresses where the work is being done. We have listed two addresses and actually assigned it two case numbers, but we'll consider it simultaneously. The building is located in the Central Geneva Historic District on the north side of State Street. It is right at the heart of our local historic district at the corner of 3rd and State. The building has a very interesting and fascinating history, which I've provided for you in the agenda packet, but in short, the original building that is still contained within the existing building was built around 1860, and then in 1924 it was expanded by the Johnson family, and an additional 6 to 8 feet was added to the east, and then the building was lengthened and it was covered in brick, and quite an extensive remodeling at the 301 West State Street building. That was done by the Wilson brothers, so it again, we know that the Wilson brothers are significant people in Geneva. And then the building at the rear in this picture, in the color picture, is the Air Day building, which replaced an earlier building that had served as a tailor shop well as far back as the mid-19th century. And when Victor Erday came to Geneva, he acquired it and eventually tore that building down and built this building at the rear of this property around 1930. He eventually purchased the Johnson building and expanded his business into the entire building. One of the earliest images of the Johnson building that clearly shows the historic second floor windows, which are part of the discussion this evening, show that the configuration is a multi-light upper sash of 8 over a single light lower sash, so 8 over 1 windows. You can see that also on the side, the first floor windows have been altered along 3rd Street and increased in size. I included these in your packet as well, but just for reference, there are some historic photographs that have been submitted. The property along 3rd Street, or the front along 3rd Street, you can see the Air Day clothing and tailoring sign from the 1954 era. And what's interesting to note about that is you can see there is a small open gap between the two buildings if you look closely at that image. So the buildings were not connected by the existing stairwell that is in there in 1954. In 1961, the building at 10 North 3rd Street was dramatically renovated with a very mid-century modern storefront done by local architect Thomas Emma. And the press picked up on this. It was featured in several area newspapers, including the Aurora Beacon News, which published a story and brief information about it in February of 1962. The storefront was thoroughly modern, as you can see from these two images, an image from February 1962 and then a later image from 1970 that clearly shows the nature of the canopy and the signage on the building at that time. As you're all aware, the building was then again remodeled, I believe in the 1980s, and the storefront was closed in more and removed many of the large display windows, and the canopy was then covered with this larger canopy structure that exists today. The proposal is to return the 10 North 3rd Street facade back to its 1962 appearance. while restoring the 4 windows of the Erde apartment, which was on the 2nd floor of that building. So I didn't bring my... So these 4 windows are proposed to be restored, and those are in the original apartment of the Erde family. And again, the 1962 facade would be replicated and restored. The proposal also includes the replacement of the 2nd floor windows, and I'll talk about that just a little bit here. Well, I'll talk about it now. I was invited to go walk through the site, and the 2nd floor has been used for some office space, but is largely has been kind of vacant or storage space. And the windows are in a variety of repair. If you walk by and look at the windows in detail, you'll see that some of the sash have been replaced. There's actually a couple of vinyl windows that have been replaced across the 2nd floor. And then some of the wood windows have really suffered from the space not being utilized for anything or not being heated or maintained. So the windows have started to really show evidence of rot and deterioration, particularly in this area here, which it was primarily used for storage the last several decades. So just as a way of reference, I've included this slide for your reference as the things that are being asked or being proposed. The storefront windows here are being proposed to be retained. The 2nd floor windows are being proposed to be replaced in kind or with a clad unit that would replicate the original 8/1 windows. These windows are being proposed to be retained and restored. The 1962 storefront is being proposed to be returned back to its 1962 character, and this is a detailed proposed canopy. The brick is proposed to be painted again, and on the north 1-story portion, there's a proposal to add a rooftop deck with glass paneled railings to be as unobtrusive as possible and sympathetic to the 1962 glassy storefront below. The north facade, which is against the parking lot but is visible from 3rd Street, would include the installation of new windows, and also the removal of two high transom-type windows in the living room and the former dining room, and replacing those with a sliding glass door with this glass rail at the patio, the rooftop patio, and then replacing the long window with 2 double-hung windows for the location of a new kitchen. The existing stucco parging is proposed to be retained, and as well as the siding on this mechanical addition that is, again, very slightly visible from 3rd Street. Again, just for your reference as you're discussing this, I've provided arrows highlighting the things that are being changed or being altered or being proposed to be modified in the plans. For reference, again, this may be helpful as you're discussing the project. This is the proposed current floor plan on the 1st floor of the 10 North 3rd Street. The proposed 1st floor plan of the 301 State Street, again, no significant changes that are subject to review by the HPC on the 301 West State Street part of the building. The proposed 2nd floor renovation of the former Erde family apartment on the 2nd floor of the 10 North 3rd Street, and then the proposed 2nd floor modifications at the 301 West State Street portion of the building. So with that is a general overview of the project. And I will turn it over to Dan Marshall, the architect, who's here to answer any questions you may have.
Michael, before
Yes.
you do that, when I was there this afternoon, I believed that there are portions of the brick that have not been painted at all. Is that true, or am I just not seeing the paint?
There have been some areas where there's been some paint testing removal done.
I did see that, yes.
But I will tell you, I will let the architect and the
Oh, okay.
the applicant answer that because I don't want to mislead anything. I don't recall clearly enough if there's some unpainted brick.
Thank you.
This is the pointer.
Okay,
And I'll
thanks.
take you back and forward, or you can use the arrows.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dan Marshall, and I'm joined here with Rachel and Drew Greider, which are the owners of the business moving in, and I'd just like to introduce you to them and let them have a minute to say hello, and then I
Well, welcome.
Thank you. This is our first city hall meeting, so, yeah, thank you for everybody this evening. I guess I'll start with, it may be a little unusual to see us. I know this is a pretty significant real estate project. This is our first endeavor, other than our family home. And the reason for why we're doing this is, I own an investment firm and a tax firm in Geneva. It was founded in 1968, and we have outgrown our current space, which is currently at 423 Williamsburg, so State in Williamsburg. And so some of the things that the firm is excited about, other than the obvious, where, this is a really great location for, that we can be proud of, being Geneva-based, being in the downtown area is a big improvement for us. Clients are excited about it. But one of our very first addresses was across the street at 318 West State. And, the founder, that was sort of the cherry on top when we were looking at doing this project. So it's a lot that we're biting off, but we have, we've surrounded ourselves with a really good team that, Dan, of course, Brian Hogan and his team, who I know has dealt with this, especially with the historic preservation in this town. Karen Mannett and her team, very integrated within town and wants to preserve Geneva as much as she can as well. So, we're just here to answer questions.
looks pretty good for starting a business in '68, doesn't it?
He does, yes.
The cool thing about this project is getting to save a building, not have to tear down a building, bringing in a new business and rehabilitating. And we got a good fit with a client that is willing to keep a similar look as the 62 edition. There's some tweaks for functionality for them, but in general, we've tried to drive it back towards that look and away from the 80s look. It's a great opportunity to save this building. I don't know of any brick that has not been painted on the sides that you see from the streets. There's some in the back, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's all been painted, including the limestone has been painted multiple layers, unfortunately. So we try to do some testing to remove it, but the expense and the potential damage to the brick for doing it a cheaper way led us back to painting over the existing paint. And it does seem to be holding up pretty well, considering some painted brick that the whole biscuit flakes off the front, and that's not happening. So that leads me to think that it was done properly and gives us a decent base to paint over. The windows, as Michael said, are in very rough condition. The ones in the apartment, the Erde's apartment that had been heated and maintained, are in a little better shape. So Michael thought it would be important to try to preserve those, and that's what we're proposing to do. But trying to do a hodgepodge of preserving windows versus replacing windows seemed like it'd be better to take all those windows and keep them looking the same, which was the original character of the building, and allow allows us to do that without storm windows as well then, which I think looks a little more like the original pictures that you saw. The roof deck that we're proposing is an amenity for living downtown, giving some outdoor space. And so we tried to make it minimal in terms of the impact. We didn't want to put balusters on it or try to pretend like it's some historical deck. And we're just proposing to do some frosted glass so that you don't see the furniture and keep a very simple railing on it.
Also set it back.
And set it back
Further
a
from
few
the
feet
door.
from the front so that it isn't right up there in your face. And the canopy hangs out way past that. So I think it'll be hard to see until you're kind of on the corner of 3rd and Hamilton. But I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, but I bet you guys will ask.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the commission? Questions? Oh, first of all, should we start, do you want to break this down into parts, or do you think we can do this as an entirety? Do you want to talk about windows first, or talk about the facade first, or how would you like to approach this?
I think it's the pleasure of the commission, how you're comfortable discussing it.
I'm open for suggestions.
Well,
Fine,
since,
talking about the whole
Whole
project,
project? Okay, let's do that.
maybe in pieces.
but maybe the section where the 1960s renovation or replication, maybe we should only discuss that altogether instead of bouncing around from one section to another, because I think that's the section that has the most impact on what we're looking at.
Very good. Any comments on the 60s edition, or I guess it's not a
Reissue?
Reinterpretation? I'm not sure what the right word is. Michael, what's the right word?
I would say a reinterpretation is fine. It's not an
Reinterpretation.
exact replication, but they have had the good fortune of having the architect's drawings for many of these alterations over the years have been kept in the building. So they have tried to be very faithful to the original architecture of Thomas Emma, who did this, and other work that's been done in the building. So this is
Tom
not just,
Emma's-
this is not just from photographs, it's actually from architectural drawings they've had access to.
The
Tom
Verdes had
Emma's-
stocks of plans in the basement
Really?
that Dan and
Yeah.
Drew and I have been through extensively.
Yeah.
that helps a lot.
Don't get rid of those.
No.
The ones from
No.
Tom Emma.
Yeah, we have them scanned in now too. Michael has them.
Now, the one thing that I noticed on the photographs, that the brick that's at the bottom of the windows is a very 1960s look.
Yeah.
The brick is in courses that go straight up and down. Is that what you're intending, or are you doing something different there? Because it's hard to tell from what you're planning.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I mean, it's a very subtle detail you noticed,
Yeah.
but we are proposing to keep it that way.
To keep it that way?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
As well as to the, you see the, use the pointer, I think. There you go. That area right there, which is right here, that's also stacked brick as part of the 60s edition. So we're keeping that.
So is that brick underneath what's there now, or are you redoing it?
We don't know exactly what's underneath the low part. The big part, that big panel is there, and you can see it. And
It
it's-
is?
Yeah, it's there, you can see it, it's stacked, it's painted, so you
Yeah.
know, it's hard to see the joint lines, but it's
Wow,
there.
how nice is that? Okay, all right.
Any other comments on the brick or on the 60s edition?
And the awning, is the awning still underneath that blue curvy thing?
We don't know what condition it is. We've opened up some panels, and it looks like there's some beat up, something up there, so we gotta take that down to really see what kind of condition it's in. But we're proposing to put to reface that so that we can get it looking better. I'm sure it's full of holes and screws from putting that 80s thing on.
Probably,
Yeah.
yes, probably. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes, I'm looking at that detail of the restoration of the canopy along that elevation. And when I look on the elevation that's up there, it's a little easier to see in our drawings. There's, the overall dimension is 2.4 here, and then there's 4 inches. I guess that total is the whole 2.8 that shows on the detail.
Yes.
But there's a dashed line, probably a foot below, that's not really visible there, but it's on these elevations right above the word signage. What is that?
That dash line right there you're talking about?
It's on I see it on the elevation right above the word, the signage.
Oh, okay, that's the old canopy that we're taking out, the 80s canopy that we're taking down.
Okay, so that's the height of the
That's the-
existing?
yeah, that's
So
the
this will go slightly higher than,
I can't remember, I think it might be a
Existing one
little,
is bigger.
it's bigger,
Yeah.
it drops down much lower,
Drops
so the
down
bottom
lower,
will be
so the
higher
bottom
than
will
that,
be
is that what you
higher.
mean?
Or proposing, yes.
Yeah. I don't
The
think the
bottom of it
top
will be
is higher, I think it's about the same.
I have the actual permit drawings if you would like to see the detail.
yes.
Full scale.
The top will stay at the same spot, it'll just get thinner.
Yeah.
You can see
That
it.
dotted line is where it is now.
Yeah, you can. It's just like with this one line on the elevation. I'm an architect, so. And I've got it in the details, right?
It's a great idea about taking that ugly blue thing down.
We want you guys to
Hey, now.
Oh, that's just the bend. That's just, this canopy has like a little angle.
Oh,
and a bend, and then it
got
comes down
it.
and bends
Okay.
again here and a
Okay.
bend there.
Thank you.
Here's a profile of it.
Right, okay, well, that should show up on that section. Okay, so there it is, yeah, okay.
So that's just the kind of bend.
Are you planning on renting out the apartment?
So is that what it's gonna look like finished, or is it this here?
Is the Erde block going to remain?
This is the old,
Oh, okay.
existing canopy.
We had the pleasure of meeting with them.
So impact-wise, it's gonna be a lot smaller visually
But it was a nice
than
thing that we
was
got to meet
more
them,
like
and learn a little bit of the history of the building.
elevation.
Also through the history museum, we had a meeting with them.
Thank you.
Victor told us some things.
It's just a break line that shows the transition on the old one. There's a diagonal to a break to vertical, and that's what that is. So the new one's actually smaller, like the 60s iteration, that represents what's there now. Okay, that helps, thanks.
Well, now, there were 2 Erde brothers. There was Ron and Victor. Victor named after the Victor Erde, that the historian. You must have met with Ron because Victor has just passed away.
We actually met with Victor right
Oh, you-
before he passed, a matter of weeks before he
Oh,
passed.
I see.
And that was right before the building closed, and he
Mhm.
passed just maybe a week or 2 after we closed. But it was nice to have had that opportunity.
Yes, yes. And I bet he was delighted that you were doing this. Yeah.
Yes, he really was.
He was excited
Yeah.
to show off the building off.
Yeah.
Yes,
And it was
Very
interesting to hear
proud
about
of
the
it.
impact that he had with the
Mhm.
building and what he'd done
Yeah.
with it.
I have another elevation question. I know that siding on the back, which would be the north, near where your proposed deck is existing.
Yeah.
But everything else is masonry on this. How old is that siding? What condition have you considered? I don't know.
We would love to replace it, it's a financial issue right now.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with it, it's actually vinyl siding.
Oh,
It's pretty,
yeah.
pretty
Yeah, but I
crummy.
mean, you've got this big masonry edifice here, and then I see this little chunk of.
Yeah, we explored taking the stucco off and replacing that and we just decided that we should put the money into the two street sides to start with, and I think long-term, with these guys being successful as they are, I think you'll see that as an improvement down the road.
Yeah,
I think,
sure.
yeah.
Well, that back wall was an ephes or a drive-it or something on your plan, so that would date it to not very old either.
Yeah, no, it's not, that can't be that old, but I got a feeling it came in with the 80s renovation or new remodeling. And I have a feeling they did it because it needed tuck pointing and somebody sold them on the drive-it as being a better thing.
I didn't think they ever allowed that in Geneva. I was surprised they did.
It's been a long time.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Except for one
There's-
house, I think.
There's a couple of buildings up on Peyton that have drive-it on them. Yeah.
Reluctantly, I believe, if you look back on the minutes.
Any more comments on the 60s edition? I personally, I think it's nice. It's a nice, it fits our mission and within our period of significance. And I think that area is sort of getting that kind of vibe. I mean, with the building across the street, the restaurant next door. I mean, it's kind of a nice addition to that area. If we tried to bring this back, it might look a little out of place. Now it kind of blends in well.
Yeah.
I think for me, I love the idea of it. I feel it has to be done very sensitively, though. I mean, you really have to be careful to keep it to that 60s look. And when you were saying you were going to make some modifications, could you kind of explain how are you going to change it from
Well,
Emma's
I think
original
probably the
plan,
biggest
let's say?
is the material of the fascia, is that we would like to use more of a flush panel with flush seams rather than I think the original sort of had some sort, you can't really see it very well in the pictures, but in the drawings, they just show a little bit of it had maybe some sort of scallop to it. So that is a look that doesn't really work with their business very well, and we'd like to put signage on that. So we'd like to do more of a flush panel with a very thin joint on it that does look a little more to date with their business.
Okay. I think that to me, that's key to not creating this sort of false sense of history, is to try to recreate it as accurately as possible. You know, so that part of it anyway is that would be my concern.
Right here. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, right there. It's hard to tell what it is. Maybe it's little flush panels.
Oh, sure.
The drawings didn't really call it out. It just kind of showed vertical lines on it. So I think we haven't really ordered that material yet, but I think the lines will be farther apart essentially than that. And that's one thing. And the soffit, we'd like to take that same material underneath that as well. I think it will hold up better and look great.
Now, the other thing to me, and especially since we have this picture up there now, is since this was originally two buildings, clearly that the stacked brick area that you were talking about is a different color, and it really delineates the two buildings. It separates the two buildings and gives you a sense of what the history of that building was. Whereas if we tried to paint over that entirely, you would lose that. You're trying to make it one big mass, where here now you're getting back to seeing it as two separate buildings with a clear definition. This is where that was filled in. And I think the stacked or the light brick also looks like that's what they use down along the base under the windows, right?
Yeah, you can see three different bricks here. You got this infill brick is sort of a tan, and then the Erdé's brick, and then the 60s brick.
Right. So I guess my question is, if we were really going to bring it back to the 60s, we should try to maintain that lighter brick look. And by doing that, you'd also be able to distinguish between the two buildings. You'd be able to separate the two visually. I don't know, how does anybody else feel about that? Does that make sense, or? Anybody hate the idea?
No, I think your idea about making sure that people remember that there were two separate buildings that were joined together is a good point. How to do it, that I'm not sure about.
difficulty is because they're all painted the same color now.
Right.
It'd be difficult to draw it out.
Can you, or on this photograph, can you point out where that is?
Well, see, that brick is pretty dark, actually. It's right in there. It's hard to
That's
see.
the
It's in the
stacked brick
shell.
that he's
That's
pointing to.
stacked brick.
I've seen those.
And I have a feeling there was some of this brick down there that got blown away when they did the 60s edition. And then this has been painted for a long time, I think. But it looks like back in the 80s even, this wasn't painted to me. So somebody came back and painted this to make it look like all one building. But I think they painted this to look like that, or pretty close to that at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a...
So what is the plan for the brick where the Erde block is, that second story?
Yeah, that is to repaint the existing paint that's up there now, is to repaint that. So,
And below to repaint it?
just,
Same
yeah,
color?
yeah.
Same
And
plan.
we've presumed to paint it all one color. We haven't really floated the idea of painting it different colors or subtle differences or something like that, but we could.
Well, I mean, you've already
Explore
stripped some of that. I mean, I understand that stripping the whole building would be cost prohibitive, but if you could strip this lighter 60s brick as part of your 60s renovation, that might carry a better look, I would think. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here. I need help.
How big was the opening between, or the separation between the two buildings? I mean, what are we talking about?
You can see it pretty good right here.
So we're talking
From
about
there
5
to
feet,
there.
maybe?
Yeah, it was a little alleyway that by the looks on the inside from where there's some interior doors that have a glass panel that looks right into a brick wall.
Yeah.
I see.
think it was like an old back porch kind of, stair out.
I
wood
see.
structure, I imagine, in my mind at least.
I see. And then somebody just filled it in then?
And it's basically a stairwell with one, they called it the fishing room, above the stairwell where the Erdes stored all their fishing gear.
Yeah, that,
If you're looking below the canopy, it's all one, it's all has that stacked brick. And that includes part of that filled-in
Yes,
portion.
yeah.
So to call out just that sliver would maybe be awkward, specifically below the canopy, because right now it's all flowing as one part of that 60s renovation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that we have to be careful with making it just look
Yeah,
too much of a jumble and
well, you were,
trying to pull together.
you're a long ways away from painting.
Yes.
Maybe when you get closer to the painting, maybe you could just consider some of the things that we're commenting on to be able to indicate that they were two buildings and that sometime in their history they were joined together in some fashion.
I think it's a nice idea. to
And
show that.
Michael can help out with that. Right, Michael? Yes. The commission will ask you to do that.
Michael, one thing that we've talked about a little bit, we have started a color exploration. Just very initial preliminary, looking at the entire building, maybe separating between two different colors, all of one color. So we've started that process. And we'll be having 3D renderings to showcase what we're thinking, what we're looking at, some options.
Okay. All right, good.
It has not been taken lightly. Kara's really intense about this, so.
Yeah, to Chairman Hiller's point, I'm sensitive to the issues raised, and I think you've already addressed it. I'm impressed and grateful for what you've done here so far. But rather than to create a false sense of history, which we are trying to avoid, that if you're going to truly make it historical, to make some sort of distinction, if possible. I don't know what that looks like. I would second.
Yeah, we're certainly willing to pursue it further.
Just to throw something out, and I might get arrows from all directions at this, but since you're all kind of focusing on this 1962 authenticity as close as possible, if the stacked brick that's below the awning was able to be stripped or painted a color that was close to the original and everything else was painted uniformly, Because actually what they tried to do in 1962, in my eye, is mask the idea that it was two buildings. And so if you're trying to be faithful to 1962, I think part of that argument would be that they were trying to synthesize at least the street level to look like one building. So that might be an alternate to, as you're looking at your color schemes or whatever, to think about that as an approach also. Because up until 1950 or 62, whenever that was infilled, it did read as 2 billion, but as soon as the Thomas Emma storefront was done, the idea was to create a very synthesized and unified storefront.
Yeah, well, I think that 70s picture that you had up still pretty much delineated the two.
This picture.
Well, that, yeah. You know, and it's part of the physical history of the building. I mean, I would feel uncomfortable sort of hiding the, you know, what's happened to the building or changed over time. And that's actually, you know, we're guided by Secretary of Interior standards, and that is one of the standards that we are supposed to be guiding our decisions by, is that you should embrace how a building changes over time and not try to hide it or whatever. And I think that's what we're trying to do here, and I'm trying to avoid that.
Well, that was a kind of a key reason. Nobody was really thrilled with the stacked brick look, but I think we decided to keep it because of that as the original look.
It's a 60s,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of other things in the
Detail,
60s I didn't like either, but.
It's a detail.
I guess, do you think that's enough of a differentiator?
I don't know.
To have the stacked brick versus the non-stacked brick, right? Yeah, to me, it seemed like that was enough, but we definitely
You
can
know,
explore
I'm walking by it and
colors
saw
or-
one color. I didn't read it. I mean, I had to look
The
for it.
canopy accentuates that because the canopy runs exactly the length of that stack brick. And I'm looking at the drawings, you know, the bearing wall ends for the original building right at the end of the canopy. So from my perspective, I mean, you know, that, since the elevation is markedly different from the rest of it with a different brick character, certainly reinforces your idea. The only thing it includes is that infill area, which was the separation between the two buildings. But other than that, it's right to the bearing wall of the other one, so you know, we've got a good start architecturally, I think, if that's the intent.
Is this the only time the commission will see this?
This is a permit application review, so it's not concept.
There are times the commission has asked for either staff to work with something on a particular item or to see something that comes back as a result of investigative demolition or mid-construction. So if there is something that you specifically, if you're looking at approving the permit drawings as submitted with maybe some questions on a specific item that you'd like to see back, the commission has done that in the past. So again, they mentioned that they're working on color renderings. While we don't regulate painting or not painting because it's not permittable, if you would like to see that and the applicants are willing to share that and get your kind of blessing or thoughts on it, we certainly could extract that from the permit approval. Again, it's not going to be mandatory that they follow your advice, but it would at least provide an opportunity for you to see what is being proposed and have a chance to comment and work cooperatively with the project.
Yeah, I have no objection to what is presented, and would leave it to the applicants to consider what has been said here.
Thank you.
But I don't speak for the commission.
I agree. I think with the awning and the canopy and the brick, there's enough architectural definition to differentiate the two buildings. And paint, I mean, you can always change paint.
Right.
Okay, I'm good with that, but I'm citing standard 3, 4, and 5. Each property is a physical record of its time, Okay, so, and changes over time. Most, and 4 is most properties do change over time. And 5 is distinctive features should be preserved. Those are all kind of, they're vague, and they all kind of touch on this, trying to save a little bit of the original building and distinguish it from the other. But I get your point. I mean, it works in a 60s sensibility, I think. It does divide that building. Now, how about the overhang, the patio outside? I stood at the corner of Hamilton and Third.
Right there,
It's gonna be in your face. I mean, there's no question about it. But I don't know how close to the building you get where it starts to get lost.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the idea of this frosted glass. That's perfect, because you really don't want to let the lawn furniture on Third Street. But and it is set back how far?
Well, from the building, I think you had a north elevation in here, don't you? Yeah. There you can see it right here. So it's only about 4 feet back, but you can see the awning goes way, or the canopy goes way out. So it's pretty far from the face of the canopy.
But from the other side of Third Street, you still will be able to see.
I think you'll be able to pick it up, or when somebody's up there, you might be able to see them. But I don't think that really detracts from the historic nature. I think that it's sort of a exciting, rehab mentality. Like this is repurposed in a way. Like let's having a roof deck on there shows some life, shows that there's residential downtown. I think it adds a little character to town and
It's also removable, so it's.
Yeah, it is.
true.
It's not a permanent addition. So, and it is, it's a nice use of space. I can't argue with that,
I'm okay with
Everybody's
that.
okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
One question I had about the canopy. You mentioned early on about looking at what the condition of the current canopy is
Yeah.
under the blue.
yeah.
Is there an intent to try to reuse the one that's there? Is that,
We're going to reuse the structure if it's in good shape. The 80s canopy seems to have been built around that structure, and if that's still in good shape, we hope to use that structure and frame off of that. So that's what we're hoping for, that it's not all rusted or with some kind of deterioration that we would have to cut it off and put new steel in or something like that. That would be a significant cost, and if it's still good, we can use that.
I'm curious, in the new glassed-in area, the store windows, will your financial offices be in there, or are you intending to rent that out to someone else?
Talking about right there?
This area right
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
Yeah, that's where my business will go.
Ah, I see, okay.
So give us lots of good room to grow.
Okay, good. And then at the front of the building on State Street, you're intending to rent that out eventually to somebody?
Yes,
Yes.
it's actually, I think Marie probably put the signs up either today or
Yes.
will be soon.
Yes,
Yeah.
that did happen today.
Mhm, yeah.
Interested?
Yeah, spread the word.
No. No, my husband's business is way too small for that.
Okay. It is a prime space. So.
It is, beautiful.
Awesome space. Okay, well, how about the windows now? Do you want to, have we talked enough about the
Yeah.
reconstruction area? From staff review, we're hearing that these are in poor shape, but we haven't gotten any documentation or photographs, or usually we ask for a little bit better report on windows.
Okay.
So it really should have been in the proposal.
Yeah, sorry. Brian Hogan did.
Okay, and we took one of the people that you guys recommend to restore. We had them go out and look at it. They basically are all the windows have to come out, be rebuilt. They had all the details on there. I can give these to you guys, but it's
Who did you call?
It's RW Keys and Sons at Cal.
I don't know. Do you know them?
I've known Roger for years.
Years.
So,
Okay.
So it was basically, it came down
Thank
to
you.
80 total restoration with the new storm, it was like 86,000 for the points windows. And then the new replacements with the SDLs were installed like 22.
But will he be restoring the
Yeah.
4 windows underneath the air gauge sign?
Yeah, it will be.
He's doing that one? Okay.
Are the SDLs that you say 2,200, are they a piece? Is that's,
22 windows.
okay.
22 windows.
Okay, it was
86,000.
SDLs, okay, gotcha.
Are these will the windows on the State Street side also be replaced then?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Now, so when we were talking about preserving some of the windows, those were just the ones in the center over the Erde side?
Yeah, these ones here. Because they've been in a conditioned space that have been, they're in a little better shape.
We've restored a bunch.
Oh, I'm sure.
Some of the worst that we've seen is what, or the 3 miles.
Yeah. One of these has been replaced. Oh, I don't know. I don't have one picture of
That's a separate one.
This one?
I was just looking at
So the 4 that are facing State Street,
it.
none of those are original to the building. Those are all replacements sometime or other.
I think one may be original,
One is original?
but I think the other 3 are some sort of replacement.
if I'm correct, it's the left one, the furthest west, which is over the stairway, is an original window, but the 3 other ones have been replaced as the office use has changed.
I see.
And I believe, you may correct me, Roy, I was only there once, but I believe that the upper sash of the rightmost window is replaced. The other 2 are complete replacements of vinyl, if I remember. So I may have it confused with one of the windows on the 3rd Street side. But there's one that has a replacement upper sash and an old lower sash, but they're different materials. And then then there's partial replacement or complete replacement along State Street.
Okay, but the one on the left-hand side, when you say original, what are we talking about? What date are we looking at?
Well, those windows were put in the 1924 renovation.
So the one on the left side is a 1924 window. Yes?
Well, this was, you said this was 25, right? So it'd have to be after that. That this was added.
Yeah,
So-
but that's when that's about the date of the Johnson renovation.
1924, 25, yes. So
Johnson bought it in 1924.
I see. So what I'm trying to ask is, is there a window on the front where the top sash and the bottom sash and the whole rest of the building, the whole rest of that window is an original window to 1920 something?
5 or something.
Are we
You know,
saying
it's hard to
yes,
know
no?
if it's the original from that time, but it's an old window, we know that. So that's not in great shape, so, I mean, it's,
Michael, your thoughts, please?
Since you were the only one that really got to see them,
I'll be very honest, I did not look at that window closely because I was paying attention to the stairs going up and down, bifocals. So I didn't really look at that window, and that upper space is occupied, so we didn't poke around a lot in that area as we could in the part that was used for storage. I guess the question would be, you know, if you want a complete window survey on that, you could request that, photographs and details of each of the windows. You do have the estimate that you just got now, so you haven't had a chance to absorb that from Mr. Keys. But again, I think that to Commissioner Zinke's point, that if you're going to approve the replacement of the majority of the windows, it seems incongruous to me to keep one historic window when the idea of the 1924-25 renovation was to create this very sleek, modern, unified look.
Okay.
And a clad window is going to look slightly different than a wood painted window. Now, if you want them to repurpose that somewhere in some aspect of the building to have one faithful, complete historic window, if they can do that, I think that's up to them. I don't even know where it would go in the project. But again, I think the idea that the building was remodeled to create this very monolithic, very clean look, I don't know if you'd want to mix a single wood window with replacement windows. So that's a question you guys have to wrestle with, but that's my professional opinion.
Okay, thank you. On this estimate, where is the estimate for the 4 windows under the Erde sign? Where is that one?
If you look at the first line of the restoration companies.
Which page are you looking at?
Okay, at page 1.
Page 1?
Of the proposal, it just says window restoration, 21 windows.
Yes.
So it's $1,945 a window for that part of the restoration. So it'd just be times 4 for those 4.
Oh, I see.
And it gives the detail of what happens on those 21 windows for the next couple paragraphs there.
Okay.
And then there's 5 windows that they single out, like some of the sash things that have to happen. And then they have 3 of the windows that have to be completely replaced. And then they have the storm window piece. And then they have all the repair of the exterior parts of the window once the storms are pulled off before the new storms are put on. So,
okay, but where's the
in answer to your question, the first line, the 21 windows.
Here?
Yeah, it's just, we're just taking, instead of doing 21, we're doing 4.
Oh, I see. So it's
4 times that.
so it's 4 times this.
Yeah.
So it's about $8,000 for those 4 windows. I see. Okay.
With that, you're working on this on the outside too. So we'll have 4 times that also.
I see. Okay. Okay.
So those windows are in significantly better shape.
Okay.
You're proposing Marvin integrity plan with okay, the spaces are, what is that with the spaces inside the glass? Is that what we're saying?
Yep. So it's a simulated divided light, which is the applied into both the interior and exterior face of the glass with a spacer in between.
Okay. And the original was this 8/1 design, is that?
Correct.
That's what we're getting in the Marvin integrity?
And I guess I'd ask, on their page, I'm not sure what number, on this one, where it appears like it details out the condition.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like there are a lot of the windows where it says minor wood damage.
Right.
Now, I don't know what that means, but
And I got this because it was requested, but then when you look at the first page of it, he's not saying minor window damage, he's saying it's $2,000 a window. So in his world, some are probably easier than others to do, but he's still taking the window completely out, taking it completely apart, pulling all the glass out of each window, reglazing the whole thing, rebuilding the window, and then certain windows are worse than others, and that's covered on the next page. So like the 21 or 1945, that's all those windows, even though he said, well, this one's okay, and that one's okay. But they're better. They're the 1945 version, and then the other ones are the ones that add $700 for this window on top of the 1945. $2,300 for this, $450 for that. So it's a little misleading. It's easier for him, I think. Those windows are a little easier, but cost-wise, you're still your jump off is $2,000 a window, and some are just worse than others. And that's kind of how it's got detailed in the beginning.
Is everyone comfortable with this information here tonight, or do you feel that we have enough information to act on windows with this, or how do you feel about that?
Before you answer, I just want to clarify one thing to Commissioner Hamilton's point. When you're looking at that chart, and I'm just absorbing at the same time you are, you have to look at all three columns, because there's window notes too, that even where some say it's minor wood damage, you need to read the note, because some of them are saying it's in good condition, but others identify other problems with the window. So I think that you have to take that in combination. But again, I'm not telling you if you should pursue it or not tonight, but it's not just the one column. You have to read 2 or 3 columns to get the full
Sure.
effect.
And I was looking at the others, just noted
Yeah.
how much didn't appeared to have only minor wood damage. I mean, I guess it's difficult without seeing them to be able to pass judgment. I mean, it's a question of whoever put this estimate together, and we believe the accuracy of what this estimate is. I mean, to restore the windows at close to 3.5 times the cost, to me is excessive.
I just look at this again, just to be fair, because we have other window replacement projects we look at. The one thing that I am noting on that's not on this estimate is we've asked for the cost of removal in addition to the installation of the new, because that's part of the replacement cost. So that's not broken out on this estimate. So typically what we ask for is to have a cost for removal of the old window added to the cost of the installation of a new window. That's really the true replacement cost, not just the unit.
It is.
Is it in there?
Like cost to remove existing windows and install new.
When you give it to us on the day of, it's real, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, it's 23, so it is 3, a little more than 3 times. I mean, we use, the restoration company is the one off of the website, so it's like, we use the one that you guys suggested for the numbers, so we only know what who told us based on your recommendation.
I think the other nice thing about replacement windows is that we won't have to have the triple track aluminum storm windows on them, which will look closer to this picture than it will with the triple track storm windows on. I'm
That's
not
true.
sure if they just didn't have storm windows, or if they, the old wood, single wood frames that would have to be put up. But it is always frustrating for me to see that you can't really see the windows when you look at that. That whole 8/1 look is gone with this triple track.
Yeah, with the storm window on top,
I
yes.
seem to remember we've given a little more latitude to second floor windows on some of the commercial buildings in the past.
That is true, and the National Park Service does the same in their evaluation of buildings that are taking advantage of tax credits. The second floors and non-street facades typically can have replacement windows.
And hopefully, I mean, you're using Marvin, so I don't expect we'll see you back in 25 years.
That was a scary story.
Well, you and I won't be here in 25 years.
So I think that's a good product that you're putting in.
Yeah. And the storm windows that will be on the restored floor, let's see, what's he talking about? Glazing for these storm windows is laminated glass installed on the exterior sash. They will blend in and will not detract from the historic character of the original windows. Any thought about putting in interior storms, and then chances are those windows won't get opened, and then if it had interior storms, then you wouldn't see them at all. Just a thought, to put in with every other decision you're making?
We'd definitely check that out. I mean, I would hope, that's an apartment, that's their living room there, so we would like them to be able to open, for sure.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I know Michael has commented on removing them is somewhat difficult. I believe that's what you've said before?
It depends how they're installed. If they're friction fit, those are typically very difficult to remove. The magnetic ones are a little bit easier to remove. But they do take a little bit of effort to remove a storm window. They're meant to be
Semi-permanent,
permanent
yeah.
installations.
Okay, all right.
Something we would check into though, because we would like that look better.
Yeah, yeah.
Although it sounds like this guy's proposing something different than a triple track, is that right?
Yeah, looks like it.
So
Yeah.
Maybe he's got a better product figured out for us here.
So I think I'm hearing that we're okay with windows. We feel that this is enough information to make a determination on this tonight.
Correct.
And I'm not sure about the facade, the paint. There was some question as to what we could do with that. I mean, can we leave an open end on some of that for a later date? Or is that something you can put in the motion somehow that we would like to review that again, or?
To review what?
Or
The paint?
staff review?
Well, again, remember, paint
We
is...
can't, I know we can't decide paint,
Right.
Color.
but brick color.
But you can determine brick, right? So again, this goes back to the question we've had on some other facades, that the idea is to return back to a documentable period of design for a facade. So where people are asking to return things back to a different era or other documentation, you do have the right to talk about the brick and whether it's appropriate to paint it or what the treatment should be. So if you're just going to hold out to look at paint color, we don't have that right at print, but if you want to let them do some more of this color study and come back with a recommendation how they're going to treat the brick for this 1960s area, I think that's within the realm of your review authority.
Could we just say color differentiation and leave it, I mean, that's your intent, right?
Well, yeah.
Differentiate the two elevations?
Not necessarily the elevations, but because I kind of agree with your idea that the canopy comes over and creates a decent end. I'm still thinking about the color in the 60s below the canopy, so where the brick was lighter in there as well.
Well, that was my suggestion, then say differentiation by paint color. I mean, if we can't pick a specific color,
Right.
could we make a recommendation that the two painted elevations be slightly different?
Or we could recommend that that brick be stripped just on the first floor, stacked brick.
Was it painted now?
Yeah.
Why don't we?
It's always been painted, hasn't it?
No,
Striated
it was painted in
texture.
the 80s, maybe?
Why don't we ask,
Some of the
why don't we
left side of
ask
it is, but not
that they
all of
come
it.
back
Not all of it has
to
that
show us
straight.
what they have in mind when they get to that point? Because Al, you're concerned about that.
But if I'm the only one, I mean, I don't.
No, that doesn't mean that you're the only one. I can be concerned about that too.
Well, I've heard a couple of things tonight, and we've approached facades different ways, so I'm just going to ask some questions here. Are you open to stripping the paint from the brick on the 1960s portion, maybe leaving that exposed and painting the rest of the brick? Or is that?
When you
is
say that, are you meaning the canopy and below?
Yes.
Now, the cost of that is prohibitive. And also, and this is also from talking to Darius at the state, because he said sometimes they actually dissuade people from doing that because it can hurt the brick.
Correct.
And the actual biscuit of the brick. So that was our concern, because originally, we loved the idea of, fresh brick throughout the whole building. So, I mean, we can consider it, certainly, but those were our concerns.
So are you pursuing this as a tax credit project yet? Or you've dropped that?
Probably not.
Okay. So I just wanted, that was going to add another wrinkle if it was a tax credit project, because we would have to tie into exactly what the state would be approving or not approving.
No.
So.
But we did get, their input.
Are you suggesting, because this building was 150 feet
No.
back.
Just the base under the windows and the stack brick to the left of the windows, just that one section.
That's not all gonna be, like, that facade is different. Like, we're taking it apart to put the new windows in, there's brick that goes all the way up it right now, currently. Like when you see the pictures with the round windows and all that.
So none of the originals
Yeah,
there.
that base brick is not gonna be,
Yeah, we don't-
mostly will be new.
We don't
So
know
it won't
what's under
match.
here. It'd be really hard to match this brick. Plus, I think it's textured. I'm not exactly
Some
sure.
of it has that stripy texture.
Stripe, which is hard to
And
strip.
some of it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like it's got the divots in the brick.
Yeah.
But it would be hard to match that. And then the side, I think, was sort of a common brick originally. I guess that's the best we can see of that. It's hard to see. I don't know. I was thinking up here it's common brick, but I don't know what was over here, actually.
The other differentiator we've talked about as we've gone through this exact exercise is looking at the trim is very much different across the bottom. So not only is it stacked, but it's
What's the
also-
bulkhead now on that? Is it, it's got a laminate over it? Or
It's
something?
been, I feel like it's been maybe ripped off and redone because you don't see stacked brick under here now. It's been redone and this brick goes up around these windows and it's kind of got a little border around it. So I think the only part that's stacked brick that is remaining is right in here, right now. And that you can see that's stacked, so.
You have Kara who's been working a lot on the facade.
Right, well, yeah, the thing I would just like to add, I mean, there's a lot of different.
Put it on the record.
Okay.
Thank you, Ray. State your name.
My name is Kara. I'm with Haven Design Group. I'm working the design of the building. We've going through this color ideation and just, some color studies and thinking through all the different pieces of the building, and there is some, inconsistency with the brick and different colors, trying to get it back to maintaining the integrity of the building, which is the main goal, but also bringing it kind of a new rebirth of a consistency too. So we're trying to balance that out. And through the color studies, we are looking at different ways to maybe highlight this part of the building and just a slightly different color than the rest of the building. And I do think like being able to provide some of those color study ideations and being able to present that would be helpful too. But I just think with all the different inconsistencies between the brick, I think there's something about bringing it all into more of a consistent and, bring the integrity of the building back. So I don't know if that helped, but.
Yeah.
I would also offer that because it is painted, and the entire building has been painted, not like some other facades where we've looked at where parts have been painted and other parts haven't been. Paint is reversible. It can be costly to remove it, but it is reversible. Again, adding multiple layers of paint can create a lot of problems with brick also, but it's that catch-22, since you don't know exactly the quality of all the brick under there without having it tested, you're not sure how well the paint can be removed. So speaking to Darius Brica's point from the State Preservation Office, without really knowing how that paint removal is going to impact the brick, it would really be hard to come up with a uniform suggestion as to what to do. But paint is reversible. It just can be very expensive to reverse in the future. I didn't help you out, did I?
No. So, no, I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because, I started off with saying I wanted to be really tight with being sympathetic to the 60s design,
Process.
And I want, and that's part of it to me. And so, if it's not feasible or it can't be done, but to take George's point, if there's some delineation in there, in a color distinction, that would be okay for me. I could live with that. So, do we have enough to make a motion? Do we have questions that we'd like to put in the motion? Or do we have things we'd like brought back?
Did we cover all the points?
Can we go back?
I know we got through the windows.
Yeah, and we talked about the bricks.
Yeah, the arrows.
Michael, can we go back to your,
Slides with the arrows.
the slides that you had with the arrows on the,
Sorry, wrong way.
okay, so we talked about,
those staying, windows replacing,
Yeah,
windows being restored,
restored.
this being rebuilt, and the roof deck. And that, I think, is just talking about the paint.
And was there something on the front?
We don't have
Oh,
a
there's-
drawing, we don't have a drawing of the front.
Okay.
actually.
And that, the wall, the north wall.
The north wall,
North.
there
Yeah.
were points
Oh,
on
there's,
that,
yeah,
if you
sorry.
keep going,
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go,
Uh-huh.
Okay.
yeah.
Did we
So-
cover all this?
Now, there are no windows there at all in that north
Right
wall.
now, there's these little
No.
skinny windows like that and that,
Uh-huh.
little like transom windows.
But I mean
And you're
along the
right,
bottom.
You're right.
Yes,
And
that's
that
a solid.
bottom there is
Oh,
solid.
down here,
solid,
yeah,
yeah.
a solid
And that was something that we, reviewed with with Eric Nelson and group before we even went under contract. Because it was basically a deal
Yes.
breaker for us if we couldn't add the natural light to the offices.
It certainly does break up the long wall to do that.
And a one-story elevation, and it's a little tough for an office without some natural
Without some-
light.
Yes.
And views, we
Absolutely,
kicked
yeah.
around skylights, but it's really,
Yeah.
you need to see out a little bit.
And for employee morale, it's important.
Sure.
It is, yeah, it is important, yes. And it does
You know this.
face,
He doesn't
it does face the parking lot.
Open the windows? Oh, no! We can offer you some temporary space.
I'm okay with the windows in the north elevation. Okay.
Does anyone want to attempt a motion on this? Are you comfortable with?
Well, if we attempt a motion, Al, are you okay with not asking them to come back when they have a firmer idea on what they want to do on differentiating the 60s brick? Do you want them to confer with Michael when they get to that portion instead of coming back to us? What do you want to do?
I'm open to anything. I mean, I think a staff review of the plans, or maybe after they've done a little bit more archaeology and exposed a little bit more and see what's there, they might decide they have another way of approaching it. But I would be open to that, either having Michael make the decision on that.
I guess, though, not to put Michael in the middle here, but what's he gonna decide based on? I mean, are we gonna, we're either gonna say needs to be different, or it doesn't.
Well, I think we decided that we want some distinction, but we didn't know exactly how. No? You're good the way it is?
I'm good, I'm not, the architectural differentiation, I think, is enough for me.
Okay.
And with paint being reversible, I would
Okay.
let them make that decision.
And I
That's
would,
my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, that's what we want. I mean, we can't all agree on this. I mean, there's going to be some of us that see it differently.
and I would just say that, again, from the staff's perspective, because we don't regulate color, I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that. I think what the point is, I think everybody's heard it, is that this commission would be appreciative and would hope that there'd be some kind of differentiation with the exterior color to set the 1962 storefront renovation off from the rest of the building, whether that's a very subtle color differentiation or what have you. But again, I don't have the authority to dictate to anybody what color they should use. So I think if it's furnished as a courtesy, so you all are aware of it before it gets done, or if there's but again, just holding to paint color, there's no grounds for us to review that,
Okay.
either at the commission level or staff.
I mean, yes. I mean, we ask them to just explore ways of doing that and leave it to their discretion.
And I think they've heard that loud and clear, so I think we're getting an affirmative nod from the applicants and their team that they're willing to do that.
I have a question for Chair. Typically with windows, do we not require a survey? And so our decision is based upon the integrity of the proposal, which I'm not calling into question, but I have no knowledge, no experience to support it, nor really none to object.
And that was brought up. I mean, we received the information tonight. We're working on staff review and, knowledge that this is a company that we respect and work with, or the city has worked with. But again, we generally ask for details in a window package.
I think there's a couple of exceptions to that looking back over the commission's record, where you're dealing with commercial buildings, where there's generally more of a uniform banking of windows. In looking back at some of the past cases that I can think of, if one needed to be replaced in a commercial storefront, you've kind of replaced them all, so you have a patchwork. That's different from a residential scale building where you have different facades and different types of windows that are being integrated. So again, just looking at some of the cases the commission's decided over the years, it seems commercial, if you decide to replace one or several, it's been the whole facade that's been replaced.
Thank you. I'm basically looking for rationale to approve this.
Thank you.
To not object.
No, that's fair.
And the second
And
floor.
I like the product, I like the style, I like the whole thought process, but just to be fair to all the other applicants that have come
You don't want to treat one different than
40
others.
years, we
Right.
don't want to start anew.
And to Michael's point, I know that the Chamber building, that was exactly the situation came up, that all of the windows didn't need to be replaced, but there was enough of them that did, and we granted them the whole building.
And I'm in favor of the applicant.
Do you want to try the motion?
No.
No? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone?
I'll give it a shot.
Good.
I move that we approve, what's it, 301 West State, or are we noting it as 10 North Third? Or should we have both addresses? Okay.
Both addresses.
I move that we approve the 10 North Third Street, 301 West State Street as presented, with additional emphasis being recommended on differentiation of the 62 building and elevation.
I'll second.
Here we go. Hamilton.
Aye.
Hiller.
Aye.
Solomon.
Aye.
Stazen.
Aye.
Warner.
Aye.
Zinke.
Aye.
Rock and roll.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your input.
So
and your
appreciate
time.
your consideration and time.
Have fun.
Okay, the last permit application review is a request at 327 South 4th Street, the Larrabee House, to consider replacement of historic wood siding.
Thank you, Chairman Heller. 327 South 4th Street has been before us over the course of about the last year. This was originally approved under a preliminary and final plan unit development, which our HPC comments were then fed into the Plan Commission for approval of the PUD request. Since that time, the applicant, St. Mark's Church, has come back with an amendment for the replacement of the windows, which was approved last month. And with that was also the replacement of the front door, which was not a non-historic door. Now before you is the request to replace the wood siding on the building that's now been exposed with the removal of the aluminum siding. Without going through the whole history again, but the history is important to note of this building, the project is located in the central Geneva Historic District, listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and is in the southern quarter of the local Geneva Historic District. The property is documented in the 1869 bird's eye view of Geneva, the historic chapel, and the historic Larrabee House. Again, an overview of the bird's eye view map. The house was built by William Larrabee, treasurer of the Galena and Chicago Union Railroad, and this was his home for several years here in Geneva. The house is built in primarily the late Greek revival with early Italian detailing. The house is very similar to other Italianate houses of this period. It was compared to the Parker Turner house that was remodeled in 1867 by Clark and Long in the Italianate style. We have early images of the property. Some are better than others, but we know that by the 1925, the house had been remodeled with the alteration of windows, primarily the inclusion of several large bay windows on the south side, and then the alteration of some other windows with fixed units and other window modifications. So again, some historic photographs. Again, not to go over every slide in great detail, but this is a proposal that came before us for a request to renovate the Larrabee House for commercial and assembly type uses, and being connected with a new narthex to the St. Mark's facility. So again, just the proposed renderings that came forward. And just a review of the time frame. The concept review first came to us in April of 2018. The preliminary final planned unit development review proposal came to us in June of 2018, and then came back to us on September 18th in 2018. At that time, the request of the PUD was modified to remove the request for a replacement of original siding. Primarily because the testimony at those meetings suggested that the original siding may not even exist under the aluminum siding. And if it did, it was believed to be in very poor condition. Also, in September of 2018, as part of the planned unit development review, the commission did approve board and batten siding on the new proposed east addition, which included a new entry to the second floor apartment and an attached garage. So then in May of 2019, a request was made to allow for window replacement, which was then subsequently approved with stipulations on July 16th of 2019. Again, as I said, in May of 2019, the original request, which was made on May 14th for an HPC review of the amendments, at that time, the siding request was also removed. So we're getting this kind of a piecemeal fashion, and now we're at August 20th with a request for siding replacement. So just to look at the building a little bit in depth, the building as it looked in the summer of 2017 with the aluminum siding in place, and then the elevation at July 10th, when we considered the window renovation, the aluminum siding had been removed. I then walked the site on Thursday, August 15th, and took additional photographs of the siding after the request had been made to have the siding reconsidered by the commission. So I've added pictures in here from August 15th, 2019. To show various conditions around the property. Looking at the various views, some of the condition issues in detail. Things that have been pointed out in the submittal is there is rot in the crown molding in certain spots in the building. There are places where it has separated. You can see the joint has opened up in the eave on the left photograph. There's items such as crown molding has been removed off of windows, and again the request has shown that there is nail hole damage and some other minor damage to the siding as a result of the aluminum siding being installed. As far as siding replacement, we've looked at this in some other cases.
I did observe there is a small amount of siding that's beyond the first architectural break on the north side of the wall, that if siding is to be repaired, there is probably a source of some siding that could be used to replace, and that siding typically in that area of a building would allow to be used with some other material based on previous commission determinations on other sites. Again, images of close-up of some of the siding. Again, just looking at what it looked like before the aluminum siding was removed, and on the same sides with the siding exposed, or the historic siding exposed, and details around each of those facades. One of the concerns would be with consideration of siding repair or replacement is how the decorative trim under the belly of the bay windows would be treated, whether that be replicated and what material that would be replicated from. Also things such as the historic frieze and trim boards aren't clearly identified in the submitted proposal as to if they're being replaced or retained and just the clapboard sign itself is being replaced, and whether or not corbels and brackets are part of the proposal to be replaced. Again, a view of the south bay windows, summer of 2017, and that bay window exposed and the siding exposed in August of 2019. Again, the details of the bay window. Views again all around the building from the public side as much as I could photograph. Again, details of some of the areas of deterioration at valleys and fascias and friezes. Here's some other details. And then there is the issue of the original east wing. The area where the building wrap is exposed was originally an open porch that was then closed in and extended for the kitchen at some point in either 1970s or 1980s. I forget the exact date of that enclosure. And then just an example of how the windows have been cut out in some areas of the building and how it's affected the trim. Of course, with the window replacement, the suggestion was made that there would be new trim being replaced with the window replacement. So one of the issues that I did note here in the drawing or in the information here is that one of the things that typically has come up in the request to replace wood siding is the issue of lead abatement and handling that on a construction site. If you notice, these windows have been cut out with a sawzall, which is in this particular area, which would have released as much lead dust as scraping or what have you. So same thing with removal of aluminum siding. So lead containment is certainly a significant issue when dealing with historic buildings, but that has to be from start to finish when considering the overall impact of lead abatement and encapsulation or other treatments. So we received a package for this meeting. In preparing the report and looking at this evening's meeting, there are some items that were not received from the applicant. There is a recommendation for repair or replacement rather of siding in the submitted documents, but there weren't alternatives to replacement, including patching in kind or salvage or using epoxy repairs, which are common in preservation. The scope of the work is unclear, whether it's just the siding being requested to be replaced or if it includes the trim, frieze, corbel, brackets, fascia, crown, etc. If you remember at the very initial presentation by the architect Stephen Barnes, at that very first review, the request was to replace all of the corbels and brackets, and the commission in the minutes recorded that night that was frowned upon by the commission. They were not supportive of the replacement of the frieze and the corbels and brackets. There are no costs for alternatives to total replacement included in the documentation. There's no cost for lead paint removal and or encapsulation. I did not find the proposed substitute materials that are being requested. As we've talked with the windows, the cost for removal of the existing siding and replacement with new materials is the total cost for siding replacement. So those are questions that you probably want to address to the applicant this evening. With that, that's my understanding of the project at this point. At this point, I would turn it over to Mike Sweeney, who you've met before. He was here last month regarding the windows and is representing St. Mark's Church. I'm going to get it back to the beginning of these pictures here. And turn the podium over to Mike. So this will go backwards, but this is forward.
Good evening, everyone. I do have a question for you, Michael. Did you receive this copy of our report that was given into Lori a couple weeks ago when we got to get on the docket? So you have that?
Yes, this was included in the package.
It's a multi-page document. So what we had shown in the report that we had done, which was a little bit more thorough than what Mike did, I was surprised he actually was out there and taking some pictures. That was a good thing for us. And in the documents, you'll see certain areas where we have a couple of major issues, and a lot of it has to do with, first of all, the fact that with the new additions on the east and north side, where the building is going to be joined by the new narthex, and then on the very east side, we have the new addition and tying in the new addition and the garage. So of those two walls, the east elevation, almost 100% of the siding has already been removed in order to accommodate the new tie-in of what is there. On the north addition, probably 40% of that siding has been removed to accommodate the narthex addition. On the south elevation, because of the porch that was originally there years ago that was torn off and then the building re-sided, we now are also missing a good 35 to 40%, accuracy-wise. We're not quite sure where we're at there, but close to that. And so the only elevation that really has majority of the existing siding on it is the front elevation. And even some of that has had to be removed because of going to the restoration part of adding the new front porch to match what the one picture that he had back from 1925 or 27, whenever that was. So there's questions on that we have too with in what pictures that Michael had showing in the overhangs, the deterioration and separation of fascia boards coming down from the valleys, where a lot of when they had gutters on the building, those gutters probably backed up, and ice and water got behind the flashing, and did a lot of rotting out of those particular areas. So the deterioration factor and the other areas, particularly around the windows and what have you, we're going to actually have to replace some of the subsheathing because it has gotten rotten. So there's even going to be more existing siding needing to be removed than what we've already still taken off right now. One of the other problems we're having too is trying to come up with a material that we could actually do replacing, and I've got some documents here that I brought with. We have in various locations, when the building had been remodeled over the period of years, they actually have different size and different reveals of siding. In one of the documents, in the document that we have submitted, if you look at page that one didn't get marked. I think it's almost second to the last page. It's page WLE 16. It's west lower elevation. You will see that it's an inside corner where you've got two different sidings coming into a corner, and typically when you put those sidings on, you try to match the corner so it looks appropriate and doesn't look like it's been half thought out when they put it on. And so none of the corners are matching up. There's in some cases almost 2 inches of variance between one board coming in and another board coming in. And that actually carries itself around under the front porch where you got the same situation but going the opposite way. And what we discovered is the siding that's causing the problem was new siding, not new siding now, but new siding that was replaced at one time that now is not, it just doesn't match up. It's got a different reveal. So it's a different product of some type. It is wood, but it's a different, whoever milled it, it's just different. And also, if you look at page NUE 7, that gives the indication of the separation of soffit, fascia, and crown molding that is on the north upper elevation. It's a pretty good description of what the problem is. You just can't caulk that and expect that it will hold. You have to basically remove what's there and try to rematch it up, but what you're going to have is a board that's there is going to be too short, so it won't fit. And this is the condition of the crown molding that comes down into some of these areas. Take a look at it. Be careful, that might snap right off. And that's another kind of a just a small piece of a major problem. And we have talked to a couple different manufacturers on mills that, if that can be redone, and two of the three we talked to said it could be, but the cost is going to be somewhere in the $30 to $35 a foot range. And there's other materials, not materials, but other species of wood that we can kind of match up similar to that. That would be hopefully save us some money doing that. And also, if you would turn to page NUE 8, that's north upper elevation, page 8. This is a good description of what actually has happened in the years of the aluminum siding being over the top of the old siding. If you look in the middle of the page, you'll see 2 or 3 spots where there is rotting of the clapboards that, if you look right in line with the windowsill, you'll see a piece that's completely rotted out and part of it's gone. Another piece, a couple of pieces above is falling apart. This has again had a lot of water damage from water being trapped behind aluminum siding. So we go through this process and look at all these other pictures that we have, and you can just see the extent. There's another issue too, that the bottom of the siding is not flashed properly. When we took the aluminum off, again, excuse me a little, this is page NLE3. There is a freeze board there that must have been part of an original, we don't know what it is part of, but it's a freeze board. It's not a piece of siding. And as you look at the bottom of the board where it sits on top of the wood sill, there's no flashing. The aluminum siding, I think, acted as flashing, covering that up, so it was not damaged there. But now that particular situation we have, which is on the complete perimeter of the foundation, all those boards are going to have to be pulled loose and a metal flashing tucked up under that to do 2 things. One, to keep the water from running in, and the other to keep termites, ants, what have you, out of the building. So the 2 different costs that I have packages here to give you, and I'm sorry I didn't get it in, but we were pushed for time to try to get on the docket, because we're at a stage where we're really completely, I wouldn't say tied up, but we have got the windows on order, and by the way, the leaded glass windows are being restored nicely. They're almost complete. We hope to have those finished here in about 3 weeks. And what we're proposing, that's multiple over here. Again, I apologize for not getting sued. This is the party board, repair only, and also install new.
So this is repair
This is repair. I'll go
of what's there.
It's repair and replace of what's there. Oh, yeah.
Now, repair and replace of what?
Of the existing siding
And what about the trim
and the trim.
and the corbels?
Corbels, some of the corbels are gonna have to be repaired because they're broken. They would remain. As many as we can keep on the building, we'll keep them on. But some will have to be taken down. There's another picture in here that shows it shows a picture of, I'm sure if you looked at it, Dave, and point out the yeah. NUE7, thank you. Okay, yeah, we looked at this picture before. If you just look past the tape measure, you'll see a corbel. And in that picture, you see a split in the archway of the corbel. And Rob, would you like to come up and, this is our siding contractor, Rob Chamberlain.
Hi, my name's Rob Chamberlain, I'm the owner of Reliable Home Services. Contractor is gonna be doing all the work on the building, and I was the one that took these pictures and put together some of this here with Mike for you guys today. Basically, it's beyond repair in my opinion. It's just the condition of the wood siding, having aluminum over it, the nail holes that are in it, separation of the wood and the soffits. There's a sag in the roof that's almost 3 inches from top to bottom, which cannot be fixed without removal of the soffits and cistern onto the rafters to correct this problem. So, I mean, there's many things, I'm sure, as you can see from the pictures, that need to be addressed. If there's any questions I could answer for you, I'd be happy to do that for you.
I guess, did these two quotes come from you?
The material, no. Labor, yes.
Okay.
So,
I can go through the repair with Hardy. Basically, you see a material list here. Material list is $13,220. There's labor to install and patch and repair of $19,000. And then to repair and paint the existing and paint the new Hardy board that would be there would be $39,000. The total cost of $78,342.
So the paint costs exceed labor and materials
Yes.
to replace all the siding?
It exceeds the cost because of what's left has to be encapsulated because it's got lead paint issues that we had tested for. And
Oh, so that's lead removal as well?
yes,
It's not
yes, yeah,
true
that
paint.
should have been
No,
identified.
what
there.
about, okay, so you pull it off, well, you're still gonna have to do something with it. Where do you store it? how is it the demolition,
What you
whether you
do is-
replace it here or not?
When you remove the siding,
Right,
you have to have a visqueen covering down on the
Right.
ground. And you pull the siding off, you put it in this visqueen containment tube, and it's visqueen, I mean, it's a heavyweight plastic. You wrap it,
right.
tape it, and then you place it in the dumpster. But you have to let the waste management company or whoever is providing the dumpster know that there's that type of material.
Well, you also have to pay to have it stored on site somewhere, and that is yours for in perpetuity based on how it's remediated wherever you take it.
Correct, that's why
So
you can't.
I don't see any of those costs on this other proposal. To me, it's like apples and oranges here. I'm not seeing replication of costs on both. The trim needs to be painted as well, I would assume.
Oh, yes, yes.
I don't see a paint number on the replacement side.
Well, let me give you the, this is the first option.
Well, and it caught us by surprise.
Sure, I understand
And
that.
quite frankly, you know, I'm a little overwhelmed with these numbers at this point in time. And, but this isn't adding up very well. And I've got a feeling if you take the remediation of the lead painted and storage and whatever, it's certainly going to add to that other number. And like I said, I don't see paint in your 63,000 number either.
That's because for the hardy board,
There's still trim, there's still your corbels and all the other, it is not pre-finished.
it is.
Everything is the
Not-
same color.
We cannot pre-finish the hardy when we patch in. If we replace all the siding, we can have it pre-finished. We get a much longer warranty on it, to 25 years.
There's no trim around the way, everything is going to be hardy then,
The trim around the windows will be part of the Marvin windows that we're putting in.
right?
It's
With the
wider.
trim around them, is that hardy then, or is that
No,
some
it's
other
going to,
material that's painted?
the trim that comes with the Marvin windows, and these are not just the Marvin Integrity, the Marvin, they're called wood rights, actually have a 3.5-inch piece of trim going around the
They're
window.
completely framed.
They're part of the window.
And what is that material made out of? That 3.5-inch trim?
It's made out of aluminum, extruded aluminum. It's not just aluminum cap, it's extruded aluminum.
I see, okay.
And then we also have a quote, some of these quotes that I'm presenting are to just give you a better idea of actually the overall costs. This will show repair only with cedar.
You mentioned earlier that a substantial portion of
Thank
the
you.
siding has already been removed because of the connections to the additions and stuff. What happened to all that material? None of it was salvaged?
Well,
Well, it's very hard to salvage it. Most of it would crack as you take it apart, take it off the wall.
Okay. Yes or no?
Where-
None of it's
no,
been
it's not
salvaged.
been salvaged. It couldn't be salvaged. This
Okay.
But if,
examples of what happened when you try to take a piece off.
but when you removed it, it had lead paint on it. Weren't you supposed to do something special with that? Did you just put it in a dumpster and,
Yes, we should have put.
and you have not?
No.
Oh, my.
I'm not seeing anything other than what has already previously been done. And again, I was brought into this a little bit late.
Yeah.
I wasn't part of the original presentation or
Yeah.
even the original plan. But from now on and this point forward, we will have to follow those requirements.
No, it's a requirement.
And part of the other thing though, too, was on the previous, the back, that had already had, that had aluminum siding on it because there was no existing wood siding.
Right.
Because of the porch that was there, so.
Right, right.
With the cedar, we can actually we can really match the new cedar. We can kind of do a better job of matching the joint pattern with new cedar to the old siding. At least we can get it closer to thickness variation that we would have a little bit more with the hardy.
What other siding materials have you evaluated other than hardy?
Just cedar.
Just cedar. You know, there are composite wood materials that are manufactured now that are pre-finished and wood-based that have longer warranties than hardy.
Well, there's a product called LP Smart Side.
Right.
That we've used that many times. However, the siding that is currently on the building is not wood grain. And LP only makes wood grain, as far as I know right now.
I was just at a seminar not too long ago, and I was led to believe that there is a smooth panel.
Michael, what's your thought?
They've had, LB Smart Side had a smooth finish for several years, yes.
Well, the warranty, the product has a 50-year warranty. It starts with 15 years on the paint, and any additional coat that you put on it gives you another 10 years. That's how the warranty works with LP Smart Side and Hardy siding. So they all have the same warranty as far as manufacturer's warranty does. It's a 50-year warranty.
In your opinion, or either of your opinion, how much of the siding that is on the building right now, and I'm just thinking siding and not thinking trim, is in condition that it could be repaired and painted? What percentage would you say?
You first or me first? I'll tell you. I mean, my opinion.
Right around 50-50.
About 50-50?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I was out there today and I walked around the building, and what I saw was what Michael had on his photographs. And my husband and I have worked on historic siding in 5 different buildings. And if the buildings that we repaired looked as good as what I saw today, I would have been excited about it, but the ones that we worked on were not. So I personally am not seeing as dismal a point of view in how the siding looks.
Well, what happens when you try to lace the new siding into the old siding to make it cosmetically pleasing to the eye, you need to tooth in or lace is what we call. And doing that process is a lot of stepping back the siding, taking a lot of the old fat off to make it appeasing to the eye. So during that process is where you're going to lose a lot of the good siding. Is that the flashing, the removal of the flashing that he talked about, the ribbon board on the bottom, all that needs to come off to be properly flashed. None of the bay windows, flashing was done correctly. If you looked at it, all the step flashing is on the exterior of the wood, which is done incorrectly. All that has to be removed to properly flash anything. All the wall to roof, step flashing, any other, things that go along with that.
And of course, everything that you're saying right now has to happen whether the siding is repaired or it's stripped off and replaced.
Yeah.
All the work you're just describing has
So
to be
flash
done
it properly,
no matter what.
no matter what, it has to be, and to lace it in properly to make
Right.
it look right.
Right.
In my opinion, on none of the corners on anywhere in the house, none of them line up. And it's, the craftsmanship is very poor, and to to actually be proud of something, you know, that you're restoring, and to leave something like that is in my opinion, shouldn't be called historic without doing it.
Replace all, repair all.
Well, I guess, so I'm clear, what's being asked?
Well, what I was trying to do is present 4 different options with different stages, but what we would really like to do is replace all the siding with new cedar siding, same thing with the soffits and fascias. That's kind of the goal. And we were trying to show that the difference of cost of repair and replace exceeds the cost of replacing with new. And also when we replace with the new, we're able to get a vapor barrier installed on the outside of the wall. And if you see, look at the first page of the brochure that we have that Rob made, you'll see a wall of siding. This is on the north lower elevation. You'll see multiple thicknesses and widths of subsheathing, and literally during the day when you're standing inside you can see sunlight come through these cracks. And without a proper vapor barrier, the heat moisture that you get on the that is formed when you have the inside of the building heated as compared to the cold on the outside will cause condensation on the insulation and affect the heating, the thermal envelope of the building. As the insulation gets wet, it loses its R values.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the vapor barrier that we put on the outside, or a Tyvek house wrap that we're would like to put on, we can't do that if we are leaving some of the siding on the building. And there's other areas that windows have been moved around and prior to the siding when they put the aluminum on 25, 30 years ago, whenever that was, that this is a similar condition. It's not just on this one wall, it's on multiple walls.
Is the insulation damaged now?
There's no insulation in the building.
There's none whatsoever?
There was never any insulation in the building.
Okay.
So
all you have is whatever sheathing and siding is on there is your only weatherproof
defense, right? Yes. Now, obviously, the building's going to be completely re-insulated. We've doubled the walls up in a lot of the exterior walls so that we can get the maximum insulation that we can get in, but we still need to do something with the gaps that are in the sheathing itself.
Is there any plaster inside the building left, or is that all gone too?
What?
Plaster walls, any plaster walls left? So there's nothing there? I see.
Because we had to put a complete new electrical system in.
Yeah. No, I'm just asking. I'm not asking why, I'm just,
Yes,
just
no,
to understand.
no
Okay.
plaster left.
Okay, thank you.
If I could go back for a minute. So what you said, ultimately, your ask is to replace all the siding with cedar?
Yes.
And the trim?
And the trim and corbels, and am I hearing everything?
No, the corbels will be reused. We need to refurbish them, some of them that are damaged so bad that if they won't last too much longer if we don't do something with them. And in some cases, we might have to remove 3 or 4 or 5 in a row to get a new piece of fascia or freeze board up, but they would be put back on. We would clean them up, adhere the cracks and what have you, and maybe in a case too, we might have to have 1 or 2 remade because of past repair and have rotted, particularly ones that are close to the inside corners of the valleys and on the very ends of the soffit ends. Wherever water has built up and ice dams and what have you, that's where the majority of the soffit, fascia, and gable end moldings are at. It's a problem.
So the ask is the siding and the trim?
Yes.
Everything else would be repaired and reused, refurbished.
Particularly the corbels, yes.
Is that in this? 'Cause I don't see anything specifically talking about,
Well, I mean, we'd have to, I guess, put that in writing, or you could put it into the agreement of the approval of what we might be, asking for, with the stipulation that any decorative corbels be, all decorative corbels be, obviously, yeah, reinstalled, repaired as needed, replaced as needed.
well, I guess my question is that on the first quote here, just to repair with?
That was all part of the,
Well, that's 78,000, and then to replace everything is only 72,000. You're saying already you're missing some other things.
no, not really. I mean, that's all part of a bid that we've got.
Which expires today, right?
Pardon me?
This expires today,
Well,
these bids. And I guess my other question is, if you received these bids on the 8th of August, why didn't we get them so we could have reviewed these before this meeting?
well, mostly because I have a full-time job. And
So do I.
everybody that is here,
Is a
with the exception
volunteer.
of Rob, is a volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I understand.
Like we are.
I understand that. I'm just saying that we are under a time constraint here. This is not a single-family residence. This is a building that the church is spending a extreme amount of money on, and we're in a position where we're trying to get some resolution so that we can continue and go forward. And if you think that you need to postpone this another 30 days to divest the statistics here, then I guess that's what it is. But I'm just stating that's why. We did the best we could to get the information in a timely manner, and this is the best we could do.
Would you mind explaining all four of the estimates? Exactly what is each one for?
If I may ask a question, though, I have four estimates here. Is the goal to come up with the cheapest solution?
No.
So regardless of if we understand the estimates or not, I don't know exactly what I'm evaluating when I have four different numbers. If the goal is not for the cheapest solution, then I don't know, I'm not sure what the point of this exercise is.
If the difference between repair and replace is excessive, then we can consider, that would be one of our elements that we consider, but
Okay.
it has to be excessive for us to,
Okay,
otherwise
but-
our goal is to follow the standard, and our siding policy is very clear that,
Right.
we simply do not allow replacement if restoration is feasible.
And if the owner's choice is cedar, then the other two estimates are really irrelevant then, right?
No, they're just use those as an
Okay.
example of using different product. And the idea of replacing all with cedar is the fact that we can bring the building up to some kind of a reasonable energy efficiency that we won't have
Sure, I
without
understand.
some type of vapor barrier, moisture barrier.
And this cedar is pre-finished?
Yes. This is the sample of it right here. This is just a prime coat. This would be the material that we would be using.
But then are you gonna paint it?
It'll be
Pre-finished.
pre-finished. This is just a prime piece.
Is there vapor barrier on any part of the home?
No.
What was the red
Does the
resin?
siding have to be removed does all the siding have to be removed anyway to install the vapor barrier?
Yes.
Michael, is there any way to provide a vapor barrier on the inside of the building?
Yeah. Oh, this is the cedar.
No, there's debate amongst insulating engineers as to
No.
whether or not vapor barriers
No.
really serve a purpose in that historic building. So,
George says no.
Well, your condensation then occurs on the inside of the envelope,
you're not
I
going to.
see.
which would not be
I see.
a
Okay.
good idea.
The question is whether or not a vapor barrier is is necessary or essential in a historic building. And again, you can read dozens and dozens of articles and have dozens and dozens of opinions on that.
Okay.
One of the problems that does occur when you're using historic materials and you change the way the building's insulated and the way vapor permeates the wall, is that you start having problems that never surfaced before those changes were made.
Okay.
We have an engineer amongst us who can probably speak volumes on it more than I can speak on it, so.
Well, if I might interrupt, one of the other requirements also is once, as an architect, you know this too, that in remodeling, once you remove the plaster, the lath, what have you, drywall, and you have an open stud cavity, you now have to meet the new insulation requirements to put the insulation back in. You just can't, meaning if you open up a 2x4 wall that only has an R13 insulation value, you have to fur that wall out so that you can get an R20 back in, and you have to do that, in some cases, very difficult to do because you have to expand the size of the wall to be able to get that in. And we have pretty much done that with the new interior perimeter that we're putting in with the new wall, because this building also has to be sprinkler, fire protected. And there's been additional chases, spaces that we've had put in to accommodate all the sprinkling.
Is it possible to get a guesstimate, estimate of what percentage of, I think Commissioner Zenke raised a great point, what percentage of the siding is existing or salvageable at this point in time on the entire elevation? You know, did I hear it? I think I understood it's less than 50%. Is that correct?
Yes.
Of the exposed area, not where the connections are made to the additions?
Yes. Part of the reason too, these are the siding nails
Yeah.
that they use.
How's that?
And they're more like big horseshoe nails. But they're almost impossible to pull out. And when you do pull them out, you ruin the siding that you're trying to remove.
Yeah, they're cut nails.
Yeah. And the other biggest, I think the other most serious problem with the existing siding was the fact when they put their darn aluminum siding over the top of it. Now there's thousands of nail holes that have caused the bottom pieces, that was the example of this right here, that when they put the aluminum siding on, now they've driven nail after nail.
Right.
And whether they drove them in, if it was on the bottom piece like this, it split it. So there's multiple areas where there's cracked. Yeah, this wood is still hard, but the parts of it that are cracked, I mean, you really have to, you should replace those pieces, not just caulk them and, you know, make them look good for a while, I think. But, so, I mean, if there's, I guess if there's more information that you would need from a standpoint of,
Well, go ahead.
I'll tell you where I'm struggling. If we take the two bids that you gave us tonight, and the one reads repair only, cedar. So my assumption is this is the siding and the trim that is still on the house. If it were repaired and brought to the level that we would want it to be, then it's $81,700.
if you look on that quote, part of that big percentage of that is the cost of painting and patching and removal of the existing paint.
Understand. And that this quote says replace all cedar. Now to me, that I'm assuming this is all the siding is off, all the trim is off, and replacing that with new cedar.
Correct.
And that's 72.1.
Correct.
Plus the,
Well, just keep in mind, there's no really painting because anything that comes out there that we're putting new on the building is going to be, with the cedar, will be coated, primed, painted, and probably 3 coats of finish coat on it.
So if I'm comparing these two options, my opinion is that repairing and reusing the existing is not excessively cost prohibitive compared to the cost of replacement.
Well, I mean, whatever the cost difference is, I never even,
Well, I mean, if you look at the cost difference between the repair with Hardy and with this other one, it's $6,000.
that's because the cost of Hardy is much less expensive.
But once
But
again,
if we're comparing the two-seaters,
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
12 grand, less than 10 grand.
two-seaters is what,
$9,000.
about $9,000.
No, it's not excessive, but, and again, when we get done, and believe me, I put the repair with cedar in here just to show that it can be done, but what is it gonna look like, and do we end up having a viable thermal envelope within the building?
And you put up new, you only have to paint it 15 to 20 years. You leave the old, you're still painting every 5 years, and it's not cost efficient for the
Yeah.
church.
And on the renovation, I assume you're adding mechanical cooling?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, so you do have a vapor barrier issue on the inside as well as on the outside
Yes.
by introducing air conditioning to this.
Correct, yes. And the fact that this is a building that in some cases there'll probably be on any given Sunday, hopefully if our parishioners keep coming the way they are, anywhere from 100 to 200 and some people use that building on a Sunday with classrooms that are being provided for education purposes for the young kids. This is really I know it's a residential structure, but it's being built as a commercial building.
You had touched on another, on that repair and replacement option. You seem to introduce some doubt of visually or aesthetically what this would look like. Is there some concerns about
Sure,
that?
certainly, when you have the existing siding, that you're gonna have to be spending, I mean, forget about cost for a while. To get this paint removed when you get this, I mean, there's probably a good 1/8 of an inch of existing paint on this piece of siding right now. To get all of this, when you remove this existing paint, it's not gonna leave a brand new board.
Right.
You're gonna have holes in it that have to be filled. Granted, the painting will cover those up, but the wear and tear that this existing siding is gonna take to get this paint off is gonna be substantial. So you're gonna have another surface issue where the new siding is definitely gonna look different than the existing siding from a surface point.
Okay.
So when you paint that, obviously you can get it the same color, but it's not going to be a
Texture.
conforming texture. That's good.
Are you required to remove that lead paint? You can't encapsulate it by just painting over it?
The condition of, I should have let you finish that, but the condition of the siding and the paint area that's peeling.
Right.
Some of the paint will come off relatively
Right.
easy, but you'll get the flaky stuff off.
Right.
It's light scraping, but you'll still have a second and third coat that's stuck there, so you're gonna have a different, you really need to take paint off, you just can't paint over the top of this, I don't think. I'm almost positive. I don't think that's what.
I don't have a lot of expertise in, matching wood siding on that, but, Michael, what about on the lead? Are you required on the exterior to remove all lead paint?
You're not required, you can encapsulate.
Okay.
So, which is basically painting over it.
Right, okay.
Require a lot of sanding to get
Yeah, well, yeah, at least to clean it up. But otherwise, you have to use some kind of chemical, I would
Yeah, we
assume.
experimented and it took like 3 coats
Yeah,
just to get
yeah.
it all off.
Just
1
to get it
square
off,
foot took an hour just to get 1 square foot down to the bare wood. 2,000 square feet.
That's not a good idea.
Yeah, and that's why part of that painting cost is so exorbitant. It's just,
Yeah.
that there's more time in removal than there is in the actual painting cost.
If this request is approved, question, what historic elements would remain?
The corbels, the duplication of the, we're putting the porch back on that was on the building at one time, that was taken off, then the building recited. The,
So it will architecturally resemble the Larrabee house, but it will
oh,
be
absolutely. It'll look
built of
brown.
It will look,
completely different materials.
we're just duplicating the existing with new materials.
Right.
Something's gonna last another 170 years.
Right.
And that's part of it too. I mean, we want this to be a,
With an upgraded performance to the whole building and the envelope. So the issue then really is unknown percentage of existing, how much is salvageable on this job.
Right.
And I guess my perspective is if already arguably we're less than 50%, and I don't know on the repair side and whatever, if we start to get down to 25 and it's scattered over various elevations, then I would probably argue that retaining that minimal amount doesn't seem like the best option.
Well, we can't hold the church to a higher or lesser standard than we hold any other homeowner. And, and we would require, and we have required other homeowners to repair siding.
Yeah.
So,
Regardless of how much is.
well, that's it. I mean, I think what's happening here, and I heard you say it, and I heard a couple of people over here, that, we got all this information tonight, and we're raising questions, and even you're questioning whether we can deal with all this in one meeting. I think we have more questions, and you've raised more questions than we can really deal with tonight. I mean, I would rather entertain a motion to continue this so that we can absorb this and we can raise questions.
I agree. I'd like to see a consolidated summary of these numbers, and I would definitely like to see better than a guesstimate of what percentage of material could be or salvaged.
So can we come up with a good list of what we want at the next meeting, so that when they leave, they can come back with and give us exactly what we need to fit this? Because, I mean, clearly there's areas of concern, and I think we can reach a compromise where there's some relief in there, but I think we're just asking for too much right now. We need to understand it better.
I think one thing you can do is get rid of, just pertain your questions to the last one that I gave you, replacing all the cedar. We can do away with the hardy board issue, or I'm sorry, just deal with the two proposals for the replace all cedar or repair all cedar. Don't waste your time on the hardy board. This was just an example of an alternate material that, is, the church probably does not even really, except for cost standpoint, I don't think they would prefer that anyway. I was asked to bring at least two different alternatives, so.
Okay, so if we continued this discussion, what specifically, besides a good repair and replace comparison between the cedar replace and cedar repair, do we need?
Amount of material that could be salvaged.
How much left is salvageable? How much is left in that north side that
Well, and more specifically, obviously weathering is different on each elevation, depending on the orientation of the building. Is one side or more than one, is one in better shape than the other,
Which
is what I'm
is the
trying
case.
to
Yeah,
say.
that's almost always the case.
Not only percentage-wise, where it's located.
Yeah.
And some indication on which elevations are the ones that could be salvaged.
And I think we do need to know what the costs will be in the event that you remove siding what will the EPA requirements be, and how much will that cost you
To get rid of it.
to get rid of it?
So you're basing that question on the cost of the
Replace
removal
all.
of the siding should also include any EPA cost to balance out the
Right. The
cost of leaving it on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point.
Are there any other points that you feel necessary that should be?
I just have several questions I think are going to come up in the next 30 days before the next meeting that I think should be addressed or at least considered by the commission. I think, first of all, Commissioner Warner brought up a very good point. What is going to be left that's historic? We've heard both physical deterioration, but we've also heard aesthetic concerns. So my question in my head is that who is determining what's salvageable or not? We heard, for instance, that one of the reasons siding needs to be replaced is because it doesn't match up in the corners. That's a very common aesthetic or condition of historic buildings, and it tells a little bit about the story about it being remodeled, because that's typically an indication of remodeling. So is something not salvageable because it's not aesthetic or a pleasing appearance? So I think you need to quantify what salvageable is. And then going to Commissioner Warner's point of what will be left if you're doing a complete repair, are knives being cut to exactly replicate the material, or is it going to be stock material that closely replicates? That's a big difference in whether it's being custom milled to really match what was historically there. And I bring that up because, again, we hear this question all the time, that we're not an architectural design committee, we're a historic preservation commission. And so the question gets to be, part of the value of the buildings are whether or not they're actually historic or whether they appear to be old buildings. And I don't know if we get something in 30 days with it's 10% is salvageable on this side and 20% on this side, whatever. I don't know that as staff, without a lot of detailed information, how that's being quantified and how I respond to your questions you may ask about that. I think also there's been some statements made that I don't think are necessarily 100% true in the consideration of this. It was said just a few minutes ago that painting of old wood's only going to last 3 to 5 years. That's really an old fallacy. And again, I can point to examples of paint that, and one of them is on my own building that's 1847. It's 20 years this year I'm painting it finally for the first time. It was filled with nail holes, it was covered with shingles. So there are paint systems out there that will work on old buildings that will last 15 to 20 years. So again, you're getting kind of to that same paint period with the development of paint and proper preparation that you can get out of pre-finished materials. So again, I think some of those
I'd like to interrupt you. I strongly disagree with that, because you cannot duplicate a paint finish that is done in a controlled environment, it has proper time to not kiln dry, but to dry, and then try to duplicate the exact same thing in the field. That is impossible to do that.
Well, I know of 3 examples right now that are over 20 years of paint. And so it was in the preparation, so of the surface.
And Michael, my house too, we painted 19 years ago, and it just needs to be washed right now. It looks great.
So my point is, again, I think some of the stuff needs to be quantified or clarified. What the I don't want to say the facts, but what the process is, what the specification is, what's being proposed, because otherwise you can do a paint job that will only last 2 to 3 years. You can do a paint job that lasts 10. You can do a paint job that lasts 15 to 20 these days.
Yeah.
So on old material. So that's one thing, and then I'm just trying to read my notes here real quickly. And again, there was the talk about how you strip or what have you historic paint off of buildings. There are chemical strippers. There are a variety of chemical strippers. We've seen this in other projects where one stripper may take 3 hours to strip the paint. One may do it in 45 minutes. There's infrared heating that doesn't release the lead gas, so there's, instead of scraping or what have you, there's infrared equipment out there that is not outrageously expensive, that does allow for paint removal. So again, I think there's a lot of information that's been presented to you tonight, but I think you need to be careful in what you're asking to get back, because we've had several projects where people said they couldn't lace it in or what have you, but they ended up doing that in the finished product, and you know some of these addresses is indiscernible from the old to the new because of the way it was prepped and the work was done. And in one case that we all know, it saved, the replacement cost actually was projected to be very expensive and actually saved $6,000 roughly to do the repair work. And it was in a condition, actually, some parts of it were much worse than what we're seeing in these images tonight. So I'm not sure I have the answer for what you're asking to be presented, but I just think that, again, we have a siding policy that recommends the restoration of the historic authentic material in every case possible. And so I just want to make sure that you're getting the information in your hands and in plenty of time to be able to analyze, and not at a meeting, that you can really decide whether or not the information being given is what questions you may have, so they can be asked before the meeting and have the right documentation brought forward.
And the reason I asked about location was, my hope would be, is there another compromise solution? Can an elevation or two be salvaged without doing, and I don't know, my tenure here is short, if you've ever done any where there was a partial replacement, where you kept, to answer David's point, what's left? Could we salvage an elevation or two without taking it all off?
We did actually do that. There's one building that won one of our awards a couple of years ago. The front of the building is all old, restored, and the sides of the building are new. So we have done that.
So on James Street, I think.
Yes.
That's why I was interested in not only how much, but where it is.
Yeah.
And you may have already looked at that, I don't know, but I guess what I would be is a mini survey, really, quantity and location of materials that are salvageable. And I would think that somebody would have had to do that already if they did a repair estimate to know how much they're saving and how much they're replacing.
Well, if you look at the last 3 pages of the...
Well, there's no quantities, it's numbers, but not square footage.
There's proposals, and there are numbers on there as far as square footage.
There are square footage numbers?
How much siding?
There's lineal feet.
Repair part of it.
On the repairs. David, where do you see that?
Well, you have to just do the math. You've got 2,700 lineal feet, and the other is
Oh,
some
I see.
pieces of something that's 2 feet long or 4 feet long.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, well, what's the total area, and I could figure it out if I had a calculator, but it would be nice to see, a summary of this rather than the raw data.
It's roughly 40%.
40%.
Replaced?
Yep.
So that makes it 60% is still usable.
Well, a lot of it is not going to be known until we start taking it off, and when things crack, that adds to the amount.
But you did just say 40%.
Well, as far as 40% of the materials are ordered, as opposed to the whole project. So, yeah.
It'd be nice if it was all on one side, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I don't know if I have the authority to even propose this, and I'm just, like I say, I'm not an investor and I'm not, I'm just a general contractor. I've been doing homes here in Geneva for the last 40 years, a lot of remodeling projects. I won an award actually from the Preservation Commission a couple of years ago for a house that we did at 521 James Street, so I'm familiar with, the need to preserve. We probably have enough existing siding on the walls to probably
do any repair and patching on the front elevation.
That's a good start.
That we could take off, it would be, it's a limited area of paint removal because of the new porch that's there.
Right.
We could actually possibly, if we had enough, do the side, because the porch wraps around the house now and dies against the about 8-foot projection. So we probably have enough possibly to do that.
That's the south elevation?
Yes.
So we're talking possibly the west elevation and the south elevation. You possibly have enough.
Definitely do the whole front of the west elevation.
Okay.
And
So all of the
do it-
west?
All of it, yes.
Okay.
You could probably do at least the first 40, 30 feet where it dies against that
Projection over there, yeah.
First break.
That's
Yeah.
where the end of the porch will be.
Okay. Well,
We could probably swing, do that. Now, I don't know we'll have to check with our insulating contractor to see what we can do with vapor barrier issues, but we don't know. We'll have to find out what we can do with that.
but, I mean, that does attempt to address some of the concerns of the commission about, how much could be salvaged.
Like I say, all the siding was taken off the east wall.
Right.
And a good portion of the
Right.
north wall.
Yeah, well, and visually too, then you alleviate some of those concerns about matching materials and paint differentials and,
So nowadays, when you build a new house, you have to have a vapor barrier. It's
Right,
code. How are we doing this without it? That's what I don't understand. How do you do this? I mean, we can't even pass inspections without a vapor barrier on a new house. How do we, where are we going with this? That part I don't get.
Michael?
Designated storage structure does not have to comply with the entire energy code. So these are designated storage structures in the historic districts and national registered districts. So there are variances in energy code.
But is that
right?
Is that the proper way to treat the building as it stands?
What happens
Well,
when it fails?
If you have access to the underlayment, if the walls are open already, you could do an applied vapor barrier, I would think, from the inside on the outside of, there's got to be some kind of applied vapor barrier.
Closed cell insulation, maybe, I don't know.
You'd have to use closed cell insulation to do that, not bats.
Or foam, yeah.
Yeah, that's closed cell foam.
That gets to be quite
Very expensive.
I'd have to add that into the cost of the.
They do make an interior primer vapor barrier. It's got different opinions on whether it's as effective
I
or
remember
if it's.
seeing that somewhere.
It's a spray on thin coat, and then you can use whatever kind of insulation you choose, whether you use closed cell, or you use bat, or you use cellulose, what have you.
Yeah, but there are maybe some, but foam certainly is another option, but anyway. It's something to consider. I understand it's not our purview to recommend design solutions, but our concern is preservation of materials, and if we could consolidate a couple elevations with that, it may be a possible compromise.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to hear from.
Well, should we make a list of what we need for next meeting so we can make a decision at our next meeting? Shall we do that so these people know what we need to know?
Sure.
George, start. What do we need?
Well, I'll go back to my first, is location and quantity of salvageable materials.
And quantity.
And then second would be a third option rather than just random repair and replacement. Could the historic materials be consolidated to specific locations or elevations rather than just a mix and match randomly throughout the structure?
So you're saying, for example, historic materials from one of the facades, let's just say the north facade, just as an example, could be removed and used to repair the west facade and the south facade. And then the north facade could be covered completely in a new material, like maybe the new cedar.
Right, just consolidate and separate replacement and existing, rather than just random throughout the structure. That would be a third option if it's viable. I don't know if it is or not.
Like I say, I think we have enough. We could do the complete south, sorry, north elevation and part of the south.
West.
I'm sorry, the west.
On the west.
Was it your plan to install a vapor barrier from the beginning?
Well, no. I mean, we were actually, I think, probably not knowing the condition of the siding underneath. We didn't get the aluminum taken off until 6 weeks ago or so. And at the original presentation, I think there was a lot of things that we didn't know. We didn't know how bad the windows were until we took the cladding off the windows. We didn't know how bad the siding is, obviously, and particularly with the lack of weather stripping and flashing going around the foundation. When this house was originally in a different location on the property, and
Right.
they moved it.
Right.
But when they built the new foundation, they must have measured from the outside of the wood siding and trim. That's the size they made the foundation. Typically, the siding projects out a half inch to an inch past the edge of the foundation, so you get a drip line that's not draining back into the foundation.
Right.
So, we didn't know that until we took the siding off. And a lot of this would have had to have taken place a year and a half ago. I mean, the removal of the siding, but it was still a building that we were occupying. We had one of the vestry lived in the second floor apartment. We used the main level as a gathering room, and we also used the lower level for I think 6th to 8th grade classrooms. So we needed to keep it in use, so we couldn't do a lot of this preliminary stuff until we just closed it up.
That's right. Another thing I think we need to know is the cost of
Removal of the old siding?
removing the old siding and disposing of it. Yeah. Disposing of it properly.
Lead.
Is it the EPA version?
Yeah, the EPA version as opposed to the throw it in the garbage can version.
Is that, would we want that included in the replacement option?
I think
As a part
so.
of the cost of the replacement?
Yeah. Because we seem to be being asked to compare the money.
Chairman Hiller, may I make a suggestion just because of the hour?
Sure.
Since you've gotten a lot of information this evening, you've heard a lot of testimony, you're kind of grasping at different thoughts and ideas. It would seem logical to me that you take this home, absorb it, come up with your list of questions or things that you would like to see, and submit those to me, say by the close of business next Monday, so that I can assemble those and pass those on to the the applicant, because otherwise, you guys are all kind of just reaching at things right now, and I think probably you've seen you've had a long day. So, and I think that it's not really fair to be bouncing one idea off the applicant without it being thoroughly thought out. So what I'd like to suggest is we assemble this, get it to you within a week, so that you have plenty of time to get the information that they're asking for by the next deadline.
But I think
Does that
as
make
a
sense?
general direction, you already have kind of an indication of what we're looking for.
So you would like these questions by the end of the workday on Monday? Okay.
Okay, so what we need is a motion to continue this discussion with the addition that questions and further information that's going to be required will be sent to staff by Monday. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, who wants to state a motion?
Go for it, George.
That we stay this discussion pending questions from the commission to be forwarded to the applicant on Monday, close of business, and so this.
No, it's going to Michael
Close of business.
at the close of business.
Yes. And then they could forward it to he can forward it to the applicant to have answers ready for the next review.
That's August 26th.
Okay.
August 26th, okay.
August 26th or September 26th?
September, this is August.
I think everybody's a little punchy.
They get the information meeting Monday, August 26th. Close it. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Questions to you by August 26th.
I want to turn this around and get it.
But with a continuance of the discussion to the meeting in September.
Okay, so was that a motion now? Can we get a second on that?
Second by. When's the next September date? September 17th. Okay, okay, hold on. This is the table.
Do
All
we
right.
want to hear that back at all, or is we comfortable with that?
One thing I am concerned, I just want to make sure that these questions that you're going to provide me will, if I provide the right information, that we can get this to be approved. I mean, we're losing more and more time as we go. We can't, we cannot do any drywall insulation work or anything else until we get this resolved, at least know what direction we're doing, because it's going to take, just to get the rest of the material to do the balance of the house, the job, is a 4 to 5 week lead time, because it gets pre-stained,
Is there anything prohibiting you from removing the siding so long as it's replaced?
They'll damage it if,
I mean,
They shouldn't have to, they don't have to
Again, I
take
keep going
it.
back to this vapor barrier thing. If that's a requirement, it's coming off anyhow.
No, Michael just said it isn't.
It's not with a historic building.
And I understand that there's different code requirements and what have you, but this is a building that is going to house children. It's an economic issue from additional costs that we would have to provide for the installation. We're just trying to get a answer. If we could work out some kind of compromise right now to get, we'll somehow do the west elevation and as much of the south elevation that we can, that we can at least continue on to not have the project just stall out. I'm not saying we're desperate,
Sure, but your current ask is to replace it or repair it, not to patch it in. I mean, we need, unfortunately, I think we need time.
Yeah, I mean, and we have a motion on the floor right now. And I think, part of this too is getting information to us in a timely fashion so that we can absorb it, so it's not
Right,
trying to do it on the fly.
right.
Well,
And you
then-
have had this since August the 5th.
Then I just ask if the questions are direct, so that I can give a direct, accurate answer. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. You got it.
Can,
Take a vote?
Uh-huh.
Do you have, wait a minute, do you have?
Just read it back.
sure. Motion by Commissioner Solomon to table this matter to September 17th, 2019, and that Commissioner questions be forwarded to staff by close of business day, August 26, 2019. who will in turn forward the questions to the applicants. Second by Commissioner Warner. Good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Hamilton?
Aye.
Hiller?
Aye.
Solomon?
Aye.
Stazen?
Aye.
Warner?
Aye.
Zinke?
Aye.
It's tabled.
Needs the Christmas walk, huh?
All right, next on our agenda then, we have a secretary report.
I have no report this evening.
Do we have any new business from the commission? Anybody, any concerns, questions?
There's a porch going on a building on Campbell that I think was the flower shop.
Yes, we approved that.
Okay.
Yes.
Was not
Good
present.
catch. Yeah, it does look nice. I mean,
I saw a permit in the window, I shouldn't have even brought it up.
well, no, I mean, people get permits for windows and then they end up putting a porch on, so that's.
And sometimes the permits are from previous projects. I have a question for Michael. Michael, why is the project that is going to be discussed at the Mill Race corner, why is that going to be coming to us?
It will be coming to the commission because it's a landmark designated, it's a designated as an individual landmark property. So we review any new construction within the historic district on a designated property.
Okay, so the stone building is a landmark property, but why will we be reviewing what will be across along the street?
The property that was designated is the entire acreage.
So the entire.
We don't designate individual buildings, we designate properties.
So the entire lot is a designated.
Correct.
Historic property.
Correct.
So that's why it's coming to us.
Correct.
I see. Okay, all right. And do you have a ballpark date for when that's happening?
I have no details on that. The liaisons for that project are David DeGroot, the Director of Community Development, and Kathleen Timoshenko, the Director of Economic Development.
Okay, because Facebook is talking about October 1st. Okay.
Until you've heard something on the city website or talked to a city official, I would not count on what you read on social media as being gospel truth.
Okay, okay. Will it be at a regular meeting, or will it be a special meeting? Or you do not know?
Again, I do not know. The person to contact would be David
David
DeGroot or Kathleen Timoshenko.
Thank you, sir. I got it. I got it.
Motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Done.
Yes.